CD 7.
Yes, Alexander Dalrymple believes the great southern land likely lies in that very quarter. Yet James Cook, with years of finely honed seafaring instincts coming into play, is becoming ever more sure that Mr. Dalrymple is, how to say this quietly, wrong. As a seafarer of vast experience, he knows the clues of when a large land mass is close in a particular direction, and when there is no such land mass nearby at all. When it is close, you can tell by the types of seaweed and birds you observe. If you see a crow, a raven, or a rook at sea, then land must be within 30 miles, as they don't cross the open seas. And even from a great distance, the shape of the swell coming your way is a sure sign of what does and doesn't lie as far as 100 horizons away. If there is a long, slow swell with broad and evenly spaced waves, then there is almost certainly no large land mass in the direction from which the swell is coming. And that is precisely what he notes now. Coming from the west, the direction that Mr. Dalrymple's great southern land is said to lie, but of which Captain Cook can see no sign. March 1769. We have had no current that hath affected the ship since we came into these seas. This must be a great sign that we have been near no land of any extent, because near land are generally found currents. I can see no reason why currents should not be found in this sea, supposing a continent or lands lay not far west from us, as some have imagined, and if such land were ever seen, we cannot be far from it, as we are now 560 leagues west of the coast of Chile. For yes, Mr. Dalrymple, for all your clever theories, gathered from ivory towers across the land, James Cook is rather more hands-on when it comes to understanding the world. He simply goes to sea for himself, and the further they go on this voyage, the more convinced he is that no such great southern land exists. Onwards the Endeavour sails. The seas grow still calmer, and the weather still warmer. Joseph Banks, as the senior representative of the Royal Society, is sure to note in his journal on the 11th of March, "Though it had blown a steady breeze of wind these 3 days, no sea at all was up, from whence we began to conclude that we passed the line drawn between the Great South Sea and the Pacific Ocean by the Council of the Royal Society, notwithstanding we are not yet within the tropics." Onwards they sail, in clear weather, the crew contentedly going about their work without complaint, which is no small feat for a naval captain commanding 100-odd men. Yes, Captain Cook is popular with his sailors. Yes, he commands them and occasionally loses his temper, and very occasionally has them flogged. But in many ways he is of them, of their class, speaks like them and understands their needs. All of the things they do, he has done, and sometimes even knows how to do it better. He clearly cares for them. There is no chance anyone on this ship would ever do him harm, or that there would be the rumblings of a mutiny. Nevertheless, such is the way the Royal Navy works that there must always be a marine on guard outside the captain's door, right around the clock, and on this day it falls to the shy young marine William Greenslade, that diligent and sensitive fellow who has only recently started to overcome his shyness and get into the rhythm of shipboard life. Yes, though not really given to guns or marching, or even talking, he had nevertheless joined the Marines and been the pride of the Greenslade family when he sometimes returned home on furlough, always arriving in full uniform. So smart, William. So spick, so span. And yet, for all the excitement of going away, of being a Marine, there are few things more tedious than defending a door that no one wishes to attack. To pass the time, young William chats idly to one of Cook's servants, William Howson, who is with great skill working on a piece of oiled sealskin, carefully cutting it up, then sewing it with twine to make tobacco pouches for several of the sailors. It is skilled work, and William admires the elegant if rustic results. Perhaps the servant might make him one? No, William Howson will not. But, please? No, I shan't. These are for my sailor friends. It is good-natured banter, no more, concluding with Greenslade remarking in jest, "Why, since you refuse me so trifling a thing, I would, if I could, steal one from you." At this very moment Howson is called away to do an errand for the captain, and he leaves the sealskin in the care of William. Well, the opportunity for one of those little jokes that leaven shipboard life is too good to miss, and after looking right and left to see that he is not observed, Greenslade cuts off a small piece of sealskin to make a pouch of his own. Alas, when William Howson returns, he does not take it in good humour at all, and as a matter of fact is furious, snatching back the remaining leather and the purloined piece, but declaring, "I will not complain to the officers for so trifling a cause." Mortified, yet taking heart that at least he won't be reported, that would appear to be the end of the matter for young William Greenslade. And yet, for William's fellow Marines, nearly all of whom are older than him, the opportunity is too good to miss. Are we all in? We are all in. A joke? They chide young William. No, a Marine stealing is no joke. You have violated the honour of our corps. The Marines don't let up on their painfully sensitive young comrade. Oh, they go on with it all right, giving him hell for leather. They drove the young fellow almost mad, Banks will note, by representing his crime in the blackest colours as a breach of trust of the worst consequence. A theft committed by a sentry upon duty they made him think an inexcusable crime, especially when the thing stole was given into his charge. No joke, boyo. It is the sergeant of the Marines, John Edgecombe, who, with a wink to the others, when the young unfortunate is not looking, leads the attack in the Marine quarters aft. "If the person aggrieved will not complain," Edgecombe says roundly, "I will. For the Marines should not suffer scandal from the ill behaviour of one." What will Captain Cook do? A flogging? Of course. By now William is a shambling wreck, begging leave to retire to his hammock. The sergeant gruffly agrees, but allows him only a few minutes' respite before he goes to where William is silently weeping and barks, "Mr. Greenslade, follow me up on deck." The other Marines can barely hold it all in, as the sergeant solemnly heads above deck, followed by the quaking Greenslade looking like a beaten dog on a tight leash behind its master. A few minutes later the sergeant returns alone and asks, "Where is Greenslade?" "But he was with you, Sergeant." "Yes, but once we got up on deck I looked around and he was gone. He was simply not there." It is one of the cleverer Marines who comes up with the solution. "I think he's gone to the head." Laughter. Of course. The privy, the seat of ease on the bow, a double plank with a hole cut in it, extending over the side of the ship. Where else would he be? The lad's literally shitting himself with fear. They wait. And wait. But when after 10 minutes young William does not return, it is obvious that something is amiss. Perhaps he has gone into a dead faint somewhere. The deck is quickly searched, for no result. Below deck is searched, no William Greenslade. The search continues for half an hour, as one by one all the nooks and crannies on the ship are eliminated, with a dreadful fear starting to crystallize and now grow into an undeniable conviction. If he is not on this ship, he must have jumped to his death. It is the only explanation. He preferred suicide to the horror of facing the consequences of the dishonour he has brought to his uniform and to his family. The shaken Marines, it was a joke, can scarcely believe it. With great sorrow but an eye to pointing out his own blamelessness, Captain Cook records in his log, "I was neither made acquainted with the theft or the circumstances attending it, until the man was gone." Cook records the death as having occurred by accident or design. It is a calculated ambiguity. Yes, as suicide is a mortal sin, it is clearly kinder to his memory and to his family to note the possibility that the death was caused by an accident. Banks is affected badly, sadly writing young Greenslade's epitaph in his journal. "He was a very young man, scarce 21 years of age, remarkably quiet and industrious. and to make his exit the more melancholy was drove to the rash resolution by an accident so trifling that it must appear incredible to everybody who is not well acquainted with the powerful effects that shame can work upon young minds. In fact, not just shame, but the effects of long months in a confined space at sea, where as well as the threat of scurvy to the body, there is the menace of madness to the mind in some measure, worn down by dull routine, interspersed with stormy terror, with eating stinking salty sea biscuits that never quite quell their hunger, but only make them thirsty, with drinking stale water that never slakes their thirst, with sharing their hammocks with lice that feast on them as they try to sleep, with rodents that scuttle and scurry around the lower decks. Even the up-spirits, tuned from the boatswain's whistle, can barely lift the unoccupied jacks out of their hammocks to receive their half-pint, let alone lift them out of their gloom. Yes, the sooner they reach Tahiti and leave the mental crucible of a ship at sea, the better. Late March, 1769. Approaching Tahiti. Sweet birds of paradise. On such long hauls, Captain Cook, as ever, ensures that his men are kept so busy that the tropical torpor cannot seep into their bones. There will be no laxness on his watch, and he is indeed watching all the time, even when you think he's not. Cleanliness, ventilation, air the hammocks, scrub the decks, and prepare for gun drills. And so they do, with the ship's company at least encouraged when those who had visited Tahiti before note flocks of what they call egg birds fly by, a very distinctive kind of bird they had noted on their previous trip there. They must be getting close. Again, Master Molyneux, again. In the face of the master's wretched propensity for drunkenness, particularly in these benign times where the weather lends itself to torpor once more, and both officers and men have many more hours in the day than duties, Captain Cook is eager to keep them all, and Master Molyneux in particular, as busy as possible. Which is why this day, as many days, the tropical torpor is regularly shattered by the sound of both small arms fire and the boom of cannon. Against the possibility of encountering natives who do not understand the expectation upon them to cede territory and resources without a fight, both sailors and marines must practice priming, loading, and firing their muskets. As the orders ring out, the men move with martial rhythm. Prime and load. Taking their cartridges, paper tubes filled with a measure of gunpowder and a musket ball, they place it in the barrel. Make ready. Using their ramrod, they push the contents tightly together at the bottom of the barrel. Now the firing pan on top of the barrel is opened and more gunpowder poured into it. Present! They cock the piece, pulling back the hammer so that when they pull the trigger it will fall and the flint upon it will strike the frizzen, causing the spark to ignite the gunpowder. They aim, looking down the barrel. Fire! They pull the trigger, and the musket is fired. Occasionally the powder simply burns off without firing the ball, an event known as a flash in the pan. And now, under the command of gunner Stephen Forward, the men move into their nominated gun crews to also fire the cannon. Number 1 is usually one of the midshipmen, in command of the gun, who aims it by looking along the barrel before barking out orders. Number 2 is the sponge man, whose duty it is to scrub the inside of the barrel before and after each shot, to damp out burning embers. Number 3 loads the cannon by placing a bag of gunpowder and the cannonball in the barrel, then ramming them down it. Through the touch hole, which is at the opposite end of the barrel's mouth, the number 4 pricks the bag that the number 3 has placed in the barrel. He now pours a measure of powder into the touch hole. And now, upon the command of number 1, the number 5 lights the match and brings it to the touch hole, where the gunpowder explodes, propelling the ball out of the barrel at about 1,400 feet a second. And so the result. Momentarily, from a distance, the Endeavour looks and sounds on a sunny day like a ghost ship, lost from Sir Francis Drake's flotilla, firing upon a vision of the Spanish Armada that only it can see. Puffs of smoke sprout from its side as volleys ring out and out to starboard and port. Enormous splashes rise as the cannonballs hit. The Endeavour sails on. Supreme, the ghosts of the Spanish Armada quelled for another day. Master Molyneux reaches for a drink. As for deterring the dreaded scurvy, Cook is continuing to closely follow the Admiralty's dietary instructions. In early April, not far from their destination, the much-anticipated Tahiti, Cook records with pride. The ship's company had in general been very healthy, owing in a great measure to the sauerkraut, portable soup, and malt. By this means, and the care and vigilance of Mr. Monkhouse, the surgeon, this disease was prevented from getting a footing in the ship. The care and vigilance of surgeon's mate William Perry, however, is not recorded, despite the young man's keen observations and attention to several of the poorly, as proudly recorded by Perry himself. At Terra del Fuego we collected wild celery, and every morning our breakfast was made of this herb and ground wheat, and portable soup. January 1769, we passed Cape Horn, all our men as free from scurvy as on our sailing from Plymouth. There is a notable exception, alas. When Joseph Banks develops pimples on the inside of his mouth and swollen gums, he quickly moves to have no less than 6 ounces of lemon juice added to every kind of liquor he drinks. The effect of this was surprising, Banks records. In less than a week my gums became as firm as ever, and at this time I'm troubled with nothing but a few pimples on my face, which have not deterred me from leaving off the juice entirely. Tell us again, master's mate Charlie Clerk. The closer the Endeavour gets to Tahiti, the better and more lurid the stories of buxom Tahitian princesses. Their breasts, lads, their skills. And they're all just there waiting for us. Midshipman James Margara, more often than not drunk, joins in, his American accent lingering over the more lascivious of the words used. And of course the 2 biggest drinkers on the ship, Master Molyneux and the old sailmaker John Ravenhill, while engaged in their nightly battle to see who can drink who under the table, also contribute raunchy reminiscences. James Cook has no interest in this aspect of Tahiti. All he cares about is executing his orders from the Admiralty efficiently, and doing all he can now to prepare for their arrival on the island. To this end, he invites Lieutenant Gore and Master Molyneux to the great cabin, asking them one last time to tell all they know about their destination. Beyond the produce they may find, the breadfruit and apple trees were planted in rows on the declivity of the hills, and the cocoa nut and plantain, which require more moisture, on the level ground, Gore explains, the quality of the anchorage, and the wood and watering arrangements used by Captain Wallis. They tell of one old Tahitian man in particular, a man by the name of Oaha. He was of service to us, says Lieutenant Gore to his earnest captain, who sits at the head of the table nodding in silence, taking it all in but offering no response. Gore tells of an expedition he made into the inland, guided by Oaha. As soon as I got on shore, I called upon our old man and took him with us, Lieutenant Gore goes on. He tells his captain that when they were startled by a group of Tahitians who appeared shouting, looking down on them from a hilltop, they made for their weapons. But, he explains, our old man, seeing us rise hastily and look to our arms, beckoned us to sit still and immediately went up to the people who had surprised us. Captain Cook nods, but again says nothing. Sometimes Lieutenant Gore can tell such stories in a way that seems to almost lord it over the captain, for the fact that he, the American, has already circumnavigated the world twice, with many a story to tell. And though he does not have the rank of James Cook, he certainly has the personality which draws men to him and makes them want to follow him. Captain Cook is slightly wary of him, and even resentful. As soon as he joined them, they were silent, Gore continues, and soon after they disappeared. In a short time, however, they returned and brought with them a large hog ready roasted, with plenty of bread, fruit, yams, and other refreshments, which they gave to the old man, who distributed them among our people. In return for this treat, I gave them some nails, buttons, and other things, with which they were greatly delighted." Captain Cook smiles and nods once more. With any luck, they will meet this man again. On the 11th of April, sailing on a calm sea at sunset, the sky streaked with brilliant pinks and oranges, the men get their first look at Tahiti, or what Wallace called King George III's island. Banks records, "At sunset, George's land appeared plain, though we had not neared it much. Since the clouds went from the tops of the hills, it appeared less high than it did, though it certainly is very high." He takes a moment to rejoice, adding, "I am now on the brink of going ashore, after a long passage, thank God, in as good health as man can be." Now that the vision of their destination is before their very eyes, and given the rumours and restlessness of his men, eager to meet these fabled sirens of the Pacific, James Cook takes a moment to not just honour the hints given him by the Royal Society's president, James Douglas, the Earl of Moreton, though Cook knows not that Moreton had died 6 months earlier, but to make sure their supply of beads and nails, which they will need to conserve to conduct ongoing trade throughout their stay on the island, does not deteriorate too rapidly. As he notes in his journal, demonstrating his grasp of economic supply and demand well before it is even articulated by the Scottish economist Adam Smith, "I thought it was very necessary that some order should be observed in trading with the natives, that such merchandise as we had on board for that purpose might continue to bear a proper value, and not leave it to everyone's own particular fancy, which could not fail to bring on confusion and quarrels between us and the natives, and would infallibly lessen the value of such articles as we had to trade with." And so Cook writes and posts on the mast formal rules of behaviour for the men while on Tahiti. Rules to be observed by every person in or belonging to His Majesty's bark the Endeavour. 1. To endeavour by every fair means to cultivate a friendship with the natives, and to treat them with all imaginable humanity. 2. No officer or seaman, or other person belonging to the ship, excepting such as are so appointed, shall trade or offer to trade for any sort of provisions, fruit, or other productions of the earth, unless they have my leave to do so. 3. Every person employed on shore, on any duty whatsoever, is strictly to attend to the same, and if by neglect he loses any of his arms or working tools, or suffers them to be stole, the full value thereof will be charged against his pay, and he shall receive such further punishment as the nature of the offence may deserve. 4. The same penalty will be inflicted upon every person who is found to embezzle, trade, or offer to trade with any of the ship's stores of what nature soever. 5. No sort of iron, or anything that is made of iron, or any sort of cloth or useful or necessary articles are to be given in exchange for anything but provisions. James Cook. Chapter 6. Arriving in Tahiti. The country has the most delightful and romantic appearance that can be imagined. Captain Samuel Wallace, the first European to visit Tahiti, aboard the Dolphin, June 1767. I have nowhere seen such elegant women as those of Otaheite. Such the Grecians were, from whose model the Venus of Medici was copied, undistorted by bandages. Nature has full liberty the growing form in whatever direction she pleases, and amply does she repay this indulgence in producing such forms as exist here, only in marble or canvas. Joseph Banks, 1773. Late afternoon, 12th of April, 1769. Tahiti, the Garden of Eden, with many eaves by the sea. Land ho! From the west, the rays of the setting sun paint the cloud that wraps the peak of a soaring mountain. First a yellow tinge, then orange, pink, and finally a vivid red, while below it all sits an unchanging emerald green. 10 leagues off, and closing, Captain Cook orders the master, Robert Molyneux, as badly hung over from his heavy drinking as ever, to sound the depths as the deep Pacific blue of the ocean gives way to crystalline turquoise waters and brilliant coral reefs all around. Tahiti, an island that time forgot, in a timeless ocean. Beyond the sparkling translucence, the white waves break onto the reef before lapping onto the sands of the beach, even as the palm trees lining the beach wave a verdant welcome, and beyond them again, the darker green valleys and ridges rise up and up to volcanic peaks. With his artist's eyes, the waifish Scot, Sidney Parkinson, surveys the splendid scene, jotting in his notepad, "The land appeared as uneven as a piece of crumpled paper, being irregularly divided into hills and valleys, but a beautiful verdure covered both, even to the tops of the highest peaks." They are a few leagues from the island when they spot the first canoes cutting through the water towards the Endeavour as she nudges into Matavai Bay. As expertly carved as they are handled, these vessels are the product of eons of ancestral knowledge, of which these natives, their white teeth gleaming, their brown bodies covered with beautifully arranged black markings, are simply the latest recipients. The bottoms of their boats are heavy with cocoa nuts and plantains, and a few papaya, ready for trade. Every man not occupied furling the Endeavour's sails pushes to the bow, as it in turn pushes the cascading clear waters to either side to get a better look. For this, they have been told by the likes of Lieutenant John Gore, Master Robert Molyneux, and the master's mate Dick Pickersgill, is a land like nowhere else on earth, a sailor's fancy, a heaven made real by some divine happenstance. And here it is. Within half a mile of the shore, Captain Cook gives his nod. "Let go the anchor," comes the boatswain's cry. The men release the anchor with a resounding splash, followed by the familiar whir of the unfurling rope, a coarse Hessian snake chasing the metal shank down to the bottom. The idlers among the jack-tars, meanwhile, those not on watch, continue to crowd the gunwale, staring in sheer slack-jaw awe at the first few canoes coming towards them from the shore, filled to bursting with laughing, chattering, black-marked Tahitians, men and women, glorious women, who stand swaying in their vessels like they were born on them, waving the broad green fronds of the plantain tree. Standing right beside Captain Cook, Lieutenant John Gore is bemused to note a rare show of emotion from their commander. He's actually smiling, broadly, as he takes in the marvellous scene. They have come a long way, faced many trials, but here they are, and, as a beginning, it is everything they could ever have hoped for. For once, just once, the captain lets go of his modest upbringing, his moderate nature, his Quaker immersion, his by-the-book, steady-as-she-goes Royal Navy manner, and displays something close to joy as he contemplates the sheer, aching beauty of this place. All those years ago, when he had swapped his dull shilling for his master's shiny South Sea shilling, he could never have dreamt that the actuality would be this beautiful. The jewel of the South Pacific shines before him, its inhabitants bartering their goods, and he would not trade the moment for anything in the world. He is here at last. Here they will crane their necks and stare to the heavens. The transit of Venus approaches. "They are coming!" "Ba'atele!" Huge canoes. The canoes are beautifully constructed, carved from Tahitian chestnut, with proud ornamental prows like the tips of the goddess Nike's wings, moving so fast through the water that the feathers of red, the colour of the deities, employed to symbolize the impersonal otherworldly power, the mana of the gods, hanging from those prows, are nigh horizontal in the wind as the 20 natives in each canoe thrust their oars in the water in synchronized strokes, surging forward with every splash from the flash of their efforts. Riding in the wake of each large craft are smaller canoes, some simple, some double-hulled, some with sails and clever wooden outrigging. All are managed expertly by their broad-chested handlers, to the apparent delight of the bare-chested women sprinkled among their complement. Within moments, there are swarms of these flying vessels, like an armada of eager seagulls coming at them across the water, with the paddles flashing high and brightly in the sun before hurtling down and splashing water along the side of their canoes. "Taos?" those in the first canoe shout up at the incredulous sailors. Lieutenant Gore, who has spent a little over a month here on his last voyage, translates. Taos means friends. Yes, friends. After all, how could you not want to be friends with these bare-breasted beauties, these lithe, gorgeous, voluptuous maidens, smiling up at them, even more gorgeous than the sailors had dared to imagine? Typically, while James Cook focuses on what clothing the Tahitians wear, a piece of cloth or matting wrapped 2 or 3 times round their waist and hangs down below their knees, both behind and before, like a petticoat, Joseph Banks is more interested in what the soft sex do not wear. He compares the Tahitian women before him with the women he is used to courting back in England. Not squeezed as our women are by a cincture which scarce less tenacious than iron at best, but imitates an exaggerated smallness of waist, an artificial beauty not founded at all on the principles of nature. No, these are natural beauties with dresses to show off the same. Such dresses are universally to be seen in antique statues and gems, and in the work of the best Italian painters, who clothed their goddesses and angels in loose folds of cloth, not shaped to their bodies exactly as the Otaheitans now wear theirs. Venus de Medici's all. After more calling and gesticulating between the deck and the canoes, it is established that the newcomers are from the same kingdom as their first visitor, Captain Wallace, from Brittany, and not the second visitor, who arrived some 8 moons later in ships commanded by the one called Bougainville, from França, France. Not that the men of the Endeavour know about the latter's visit at all. And so the white men begin to trade, the natives whooping with glee when they produce the item that appears to most attract their fancy. As Cook chronicles, beads, particularly white cut glass beads. Joseph Banks is struck by the civility of this sun-kissed folk, who traded very quietly and civilly for beads chiefly, in exchange for which they gave coconuts, breadfruit, both roasted and raw, some small fish and apples. Resplendent in tricorn hat and gold-trimmed navy coat, Captain Cook steps forward. It is imperative to show the natives that he is the chief of this ship. He motions to the eldest man among the natives, the man with the flowing white beard, whose name is Oaha. "Come aboard." Climbing up the ladder and onto the quarterdeck, the dignified old native embraces Lieutenant Gore in the manner of an old friend, as they even exchange words in a strange lyrical language beyond most of the Endeavour crew's remotest comprehension. Cook is eager to ingratiate himself with Oaha, thinking he might on some occasions be of use to us. All is going well, until they hear a spot of yelling and disagreement elsewhere on the ship. Those natives who haven't been welcomed aboard don't seem to care too much about getting an invite. The boldest of the men on the canoes have begun to climb the newly taut ropes mooring the ship in place, clambering up with a grace and dexterity that the white men could never dream of. "Hey, get off of there, you buggers!" The natives are not dissuaded by all the shouting and carry-on, and soon find themselves standing aboard the great hulk of the Endeavour, a far cry from the sleek vessels they have floating below. Soon enough, the Endeavour is positively swarming with incorrigible yet friendly natives, poking and prodding at the strange objects scattered around the deck. They pinch and pull at the skin of these strange white men, curious how anybody could be so very pale. But where are the women? Oh, you don't have any with you? Just like the last lot of white men. Poor men, strange men. Just look at them. These ghostly beings swarm with lice, have fewer teeth than fingers, with survivors rotting and black. Their strange skin is covered in pockmarks, and they smell like... Well, frankly, there's nothing the Tahitians have to compare it to, for, as a people who bathe 3 times daily, they just aren't capable of smells like that. These are men whelped and whipped in cold slums, icy hells next to the Arcadia they find themselves in now. Cook's men can hardly contain themselves when the Tahitian women reach out to touch their strange white skin and the curious shape of their noses. Encouraged, feeling a little bolder, the men respond in kind and begin to touch the women with a particular focus on their breasts. Shockingly, their hands are not slapped away. Watching on, Joseph Banks's alabaster complexion turns as red as the feathers on the prows of the Tahitian canoes. Has he found Arcadia? As trading between Cook's men and the natives goes on, a veritable floating market engulfing the Endeavour, natives hooting at the sight of every bead produced from the white men's pockets, the ship's boats are hoisted from their position on deck and lowered to the busy water below. Taking Old Man Oaha along with them, Captain Cook, Lieutenant Gore, Joseph Banks, Dr. Solander and their retinue, including all 11 armed Marines, are rowed towards the shore. As they leave, Lieutenant Gore notices some of the sailors, their eyes like saucers, clearly contemplating just how good it will taste roasted, haggling over the price of a succulent-looking pig. How much? Well, how about a nice hatchet, made of sturdy iron, and good for cutting down whatever you like? The natives seem impressed, and the deal is all but done before Lieutenant Gore intercedes. "They will never lower their price," Gore calls to them. "So set the bar low, and set that hatchet down." Cook and company row to a spot indicated by the old man, where dozens of natives, mostly men, have gathered on the beach. Captain Cook records, "No one of the natives made the least opposition at our landing, but came to us with all imaginable marks of friendship and submission." One native comes graciously forward and offers a green plantain frond to the captain. "It is a token of peace," Gore tells them. Following Lieutenant Gore's suggestions, Cook accepts the frond, puts his hand on his chest and says, "Tayos," before every one of the visiting Englishmen follows the natives in gathering up a green frond of his own. Oaha leads them up the beach, the native man barefooted, moving with ease, while the captain and his men are constrained to a stilted gait, their shiny black shoes sinking into the bleached white sand with every step. Arriving at a clearing in the trees behind the beach, the Tahitians scrape the ground clean of all small plants that grow upon it, and then throw their fronds down, indicating that the white men should do the same. Captain Cook has the Marines lead the way, marching in formation to drop their fronds atop the Tahitians, followed by the rest of the Endeavour's men on shore. And thus, Banks notes simply, peace was concluded. Now James Cook looks to Oaha and makes a drinking signal by bringing his thumb to his mouth. "Water. We need water." Oaha understands, and leads them off to the place where Wallace had watered in 1767. Cook nods in approval, and directs his men to follow the old man into the woods. As they move, Cook and his men realize their jaunt has become quite the parade, with a number of joyous natives following in their wake. "In this manner," Banks chronicles, "we walked 4 or 5 miles, under groves of cocoa-nut and breadfruit trees, loaded with a profusion of fruit, and giving the most grateful shade I've ever experienced. Under these were the habitations of the people, most of them without walls." Joseph Banks is stunned. In all of his years spent studying the natural world, never has he seen such luxuriant surrounds, such exotic plantations. Just look at this breadfruit. Bread growing from a tree. It's no wonder the Tahitians smile so broadly, exemplars of fine health. And the women, so forthcoming, so amorous. Lieutenant Gore, with the slightly superior and worldly wise air of one who's seen it all before, enjoys watching the gentlemen's faces light up as they move through the country, receiving attention from women, a wondrous glee written into their expressions. Ah, but they have seen nothing yet. 14th of April, 1769. Matavai Bay, Tahiti. I spy with my fiery eye. Just one day, and the Endeavour and her people are transformed. Welcome to Tahiti. The ship's company are helping themselves with great enthusiasm to the luscious delights of Tahiti, brought to the ship in their dozens, not to forget some of the fruit these delights carry with them. James Cook wakes early and climbs up to the quarter-deck. The first suggestions of daylight have reached the night sky. Faint blue flecks on the horizon are heralding the approaching dawn. As the sun rises, he glances to the west to see another armada of canoes filled with natives who are soon swarming over the Endeavour. 2 chiefs among them invite Cook to join them on a trip to shore. So Cook gives the order for the ship's boats to be lowered, and accompanied by a retinue of gentlemen and their cadre of marines, he is rowed westward, whence their latest lot of visitors had appeared, landing at a place Wallace had marked on his chart as Canoe Harbour. James Cook has barely put his toe on the shore when he is surrounded by eager and friendly natives. They have apparently lost their reservations of the previous day, and are so familiar as to reach into the white men's pockets and help themselves to the contents. It takes an extended brouhaha of confused conversation and gesticulation from the white men to have their items returned before the 2 chiefs lead them up the beach, through the trees, to a longhouse. They are conducted inside, where they must go through the greeting ceremony with the plantain fronds that attend every fresh acquaintance. With friendship established, Banks records, mats were spread, and we were desired to set down fronting an old man, who he had not before seen. The man before them is older than the rest, older but none the less strong. A huge and handsome man of great bearing, he sits straight-backed, his arms covered in the intricate black images of their culture. In a deep rumbling voice that sounds like menacing thunder, this new chief gives an order to one of his servants, who returns with a cock and a hen, which are presented to James Cook and Joseph Banks, who sits eagerly alongside the captain, wishing his own important pedigree to be acknowledged, even in these far-off lands. How frustrating it is that the Royal Navy has uniforms to indicate rank, but Mr. Banks has only fine cloth and finer manners to advertise his superiority. The Tahitian women have already noted Joseph Banks's good looks and have correctly guessed that Banks would much rather attend to matters that require no uniform whatsoever. Banks records the scene. Then a piece of cloth was presented to each of us, perfumed, after their manner, not disagreeably, which they took great pains to make us understand. A young woman helps Mr. Banks to unfurl his gift, all 11 by 2 yards of it. In return, Banks unties his laced silk neckcloth, plucks the linen handkerchief from his breast pocket, and offers her both, cupped in 2 open palms. After this ceremony was over, Banks chronicles delicately, we walked freely about several large houses, attended by the ladies who showed us all kind of civilities our situation could admit of. But as there were no places of retirement, the houses being entirely without walls, we had not an opportunity of putting their politeness to every test that maybe some of us would not have failed to have done had circumstances been more favourable. It is really quite breathtaking. These gorgeous, voluptuous women are actually pointing to the mats, suggesting the men lie down with them, and even, sometimes by force, seating themselves and us upon them, they plainly showed that they were much less jealous of observation than we were. Surely not even Arcadia boasted such available favours. Is there another place on earth where the sun shines so bright, but the fresh water flows so crystal clear and freely, where the fruit is so rich, the juice so sweet, and the maidens so free and available with their charms, right to the point of making love in daylight? In short, the scene we saw was the truest picture of an Arcadia of which we were going to be kings that the imagination can form. A meal is offered, with another chief, and they are soon cross-legged on the ground, along with the captain and the chief sitting side by side, when arrives a parade of delectable foods, broiled fish, coconuts, and more, all served with great hospitality. Following the chief's lead, James Cook allows one of the native women to sit by him. Pulling a steaming piece of fish from the bounty before them, she dips it into a coconut shell filled with salt water, the Tahitian dressing of choice. Slowly she brings the dripping fish up to the captain's lips he parts only just enough to accept the morsel. Surely Elizabeth wouldn't mind this, a gesture so benign. Now, as Cook follows the chief's example, so too do the men follow his, and eagerly permit the native women to take up seats near them. Yes, these generous ladies intend to hand-feed the crew, no differently to the chief. Not like this back home, was it? Banks is already swallowing a mouthful when he feels a hovering presence, looming almost, and soon enough squatting right next to him. Our chief's own wife, ugly enough in conscience, he realizes, and just as he is reckoning what to do with the chief's wife, who clearly wants them to be more than mere tyos, he spots, among the common crowd, a very pretty girl with a fire in her eyes. That's the girl for him. Not the chief's, less attractive wife, who is currently writhing gently next to him as she raises fish to his mouth. Unconscious of the dignity of my companion, Banks writes in his journal, I beckoned to the other, who after some entreaties came and sat on the other side of me. I was then desirous of getting rid of my former companion, so I ceased to attend to her, and loaded my pretty girl with beads and every present I could think pleasing to her. The chief's wife stands up in a display of great disgust and deep offence, only to sit back down just as quickly, this time even closer to Joseph Banks. She doubles her efforts and expressions of lust, feeding Banks even more fish, and pouring sweet coconut milk directly into his mouth. Alas, alas! Just when Banks is on the point of spiriting the fiery one away, Dr. Solander cries out, "My spyglass!" His spyglass is missing, stolen. Uproar, thieves, curs. The feast erupts in a frenzy of explanations, justifications, and lost translations. In all the excitement, Surgeon Monkhouse finds himself craving a sniff of snuff, and defying his captain's orders, reaches into his pocket, only to find his snuff-box is missing. The chief orders his men to go at once in pursuit of anything that might be missing, reaching forward and grabbing a coconut as he speaks in the Tahitian tongue. The natives, seeing their chief reaching for something that could easily be thrown in their direction, turn in unison and flee into the woods post-haste. All that remain are only the chief, his 3 wives, and 2 or 3 better dressed than the rest. The chief, Cook records, seemed very much concerned for what had happened, and by way of recompense offered us but everything that was in his house, but we refused to accept of anything, and made signs to him that we only wanted the things again. Soon enough, the chief's men return, with one of the stolen articles. William Monkhouse lets out a heavy sigh as he opens the box. It's still full. An addict, reunited with his vice, Monkhouse brings the tobacco powder to his nose and takes a sharp sniff. Ah, much better. The natives look on in bewilderment. What is that? The chief moves on to the doctor, as Banks records. The cloth was as resolutely forced upon Dr. Solander as a recompense for his loss. They have not recovered his spyglass. There is a polite back and forth, followed by endless offers of compensatory gifts. Yes, thank you, but if they cannot return the spyglass, then it is surely time to leave. The captain, his gentlemen, and their marines trudge along the beach back to their boat, all the while thinking up English names for the chiefs. They had not thought to learn their real names. The first chief, the taller one, had such a commanding presence, he was such an imposing fellow. Hercules he would be, after that semi-divine Greek hero. And the other, his sense of justice. A just soul, through and through. Lycurgus seemed fitting, after the lawgiver of ancient Sparta. The whole experience has a mythic feel to it, as though they have stumbled upon a legendary peoples hitherto undiscovered by the rest of the world. "We returned to the ship," Joseph Banks records, "admiring a policy at least equal to any we had seen in civilized countries, exercised by people who have never had any advantage but mere natural instinct, uninstructed by the example of any civilized country." As for James Cook, he is invigorated, or, as he records with typical reserve, "About 6 o'clock in the evening we returned on board, very well satisfied with our little excursion." 15th of April, 1769. The Endeavour, line in the sand, death in the sun. Hercules and Lycurgus come aboard with the dawn, bearing hogs, breadfruit, plantains, and more. Cook responds in kind, hatchets, linen, and beautiful glass beads, all of them among England's finest. Their friendly trades complete, the chiefs row back towards the west, both parties richer for having met. After ordering wood and water parties to head ashore and the rest of the crew to scrub the decks, mend the sails, and tend the ship, Captain Cook, Mr. Green, Mr. Banks, Dr. Solander, and the marines are rowed ashore. A sandy spit, Cook supposes, will be the ideal spot to observe the transit of Venus. Cook and his men climb up from the beach to a flat piece of land on the point known to the Tahitians as Teorua. As they rise higher, their view widens, and Cook finds he was correct. It is ideal. Satisfied, Cook writes, "I therefore, without delay, resolved to pitch upon some spot upon the northeast point of the bay, properly situated for observing the transit of Venus, and at the same time under the command of the ship's guns, and there to throw up a small fort for our defence." For yes, despite the royal welcome they have received, he is taking no chances. After pitching the tent, Joseph Banks brings his musket to bear. Turning it upside down, he uses the butt for yet another purpose, bending down to draw a literal line in the sand. Hundreds of natives have gathered. What is he doing with the thunder stick? According to Tahitian law, the Tahitian people have been here for countless moons, likely centuries, and these English for only a couple of days. But this line asserts that you Tahitians are no longer allowed to set foot beyond this line, on this point, which goes right across from beach to beach, or you risk facing the angry end of this musket. Oaha translates, and, as Banks notes, they obeyed instantly, and not a man attempted to set a foot within it. Above 2 hours were spent so, and not the least disorder being committed. Encouraged, Captain Cook decides to go for a stroll in the woods. He was surprised yesterday to learn that Lieutenant Hicks had been forbidden from venturing so far, and is now curious to find out what limits the natives will impose upon him. As for Mr. Banks and Dr. Solander, their motivations are less complicated. Hunting enthusiasts, the both of them, they wish to see if some stray hogs might be roaming around. As Cook and his gentlemen gather in readiness to head off, Oaha does his utmost to talk them out of it. But Cook cares not, and orders his marines to stay and guard the marked land that the English have claimed as theirs. They have just crossed the river when a shot rings out. The Tahitians accompanying Cook's party hit the ground only moments before 3 ducks, 1, 2, 3, come crashing down with a thud not far off. The natives stay close to the ground, terror in their eyes. Cook turns to see Joseph Banks lowering his musket with a satisfied grin. He'd got all his ducks in a row. a show of his superb hunting skills. Cook nods in approval, hoping such skills will impress their hosts. On the northeast point of Matavai Bay, there now lies a pitched tent and a line in the sand. The Englishmen are having some trouble with the latter. A milling group of natives approaches the line. The English threats of violence don't seem to be having an effect. Don't the natives know what these sticks we carry are capable of? Can't you natives comprehend it? We've set down a border, a barrier, a boundary, a line, you hear us? Do you not understand? To the natives it is exactly that, a line, in the sand, that will disappear with the next breeze. The notion of such a scratching in the ground having any control over a man is beyond ridiculous. Before long, one native is eager enough to test the power of the line's meaning, sprinting forward and pushing one of the sentinels off balance. He is so quick there is no time to stop him, and in the blink of an eye the native has grabbed a musket, waving the weapon around like a freshly caught fish. The line has been crossed. Well, what can the exceedingly young midshipman Jonathan Monkhouse do? "Fire!" he yells to his command of Marines. It all happens so quickly. The Marines bring their thundersticks to bear on the flying mass of tattooed Tahitian torsos, trying to distinguish the musket thief among them. "Run! Run!" A volley of shots. Tahitians hit the ground. 1, 2, 3. 2 get up to stumble forward and hobble on, burning hot lead buried in their flesh. As for the poor foolhardy soul who stole the musket, knowing not what he brought upon himself, he falls to the ground, dead. The white men retrieve their weapon from his lifeless hands. Innocent men have been shot, but British justice has been done. Cook, Banks and his companions are just closing in on some promising hogs when they hear shots in the distance. Instantly, old Oaha calls the other Tahitians to him and quickly has them disperse. Cook sprints back to the Marines with the gentleman in tow, but they have no sooner crossed the river than they see a Tahitian man lying, unmoving, face down in the sand, dead. Shaken, after he had ordered soldiers to fire on fleeing and unarmed men, Midshipman Jonathan Monkhouse's voice cracks as he speaks. "A native grabbed a musket and started to run away. I had to do something, Captain." "Oh, he has done something all right, and it is up to the captain and Mr. Banks to explain to the natives as best they can the justice that has been meted out." Oaha gathers some 20 Tahitians, each of them emerging cautiously from the cover of the woods to enter the splendid tent. They sit on the sandy ground and try in earnest to decipher the words of these strange visitors, killers who have come to their shores. It is Banks whose voice now cuts above the rabble. "The man who suffered was guilty of a crime deserving of death," he says, sure he can make these natives understand that in the English world, the civilized world, when it came to the act of thievery, outright murder was quite normal. Necessary, actually. Surely they could understand that. Cook now points to Oaha and back to himself and says out loud, "Tayo," to affirm they are still friends. Banks does the same. It takes some time, but presently the old native steps out of the tent and comes back with some younger natives, all of them bearing the symbol of peace, branches of plantain trees. Clapping their hands to their breasts, they slowly approach, crying, "Tayo." Carefully, for they are still not entirely confident they are not about to be shot, they sit with the white men and send young ones to bring them coconuts, so they all may drink the milk together as friends at peace. Little by little, confidence returns, and the natives even start to laugh, as Parkinson notes, more so than could have been expected, considering what they had suffered in the late skirmish. Have we not reason to conclude that their dispositions are very flexible, and that resentment with them is a short-lived passion? All's well that ends well, so to speak. At sunset they left us seemingly satisfied, Cook will recount, and we struck our tent and went on board. We retired to the ship not well pleased with the day's expedition, records Banks, who further notes in his journal that, as a group, he and his British brethren had been guilty, no doubt in some measure, of the death of a man who the most severe laws of equity would not have condemned to so severe a punishment. Despite his insistence to the natives that it was a crime punishable by death, a threat which had caused the blood to drain from their shocked faces. "If we quarrelled with those Indians," Mr. Banks notes to the quiet Quaker Sidney Parkinson, "we should not agree with angels." For his part, Parkinson is simply appalled by the whole thing, noting that no matter how trivial the offence was, once the boy of a midshipman had given the orders to fire, the soldiers with him obeyed with the greatest glee imaginable, as if they had been shooting at wild ducks. What a pity that such brutality should be exercised by civilized people upon unarmed, ignorant Indians. As for the young midshipman Jonathan Monkhouse, the man who gave the order, he feels the sting and the shame from both Captain Cook and Mr. Banks. Diplomacy has mended things with the Tahitians, but will not mend Cook's opinion of him. Rash, intemperate, foolish. Again and again Monkhouse sees his captain's eyes turn away from his. He has little doubt what Captain Cook's verdict will be on him when they return to England. As for what Mr. Banks's opinion is, he can see that just by looking at him. Mr. Banks and his party view him as a careless murderer. His brother offers counsel and soothing words, but Surgeon Monkhouse cannot cure a reputation. That nigh impossible task is left for Midshipman Monkhouse to brood upon. Cook wakes early, heads up on deck, and sees nothing. There is not a single canoe in the bright blue water below the Endeavour's hull. It seems that after yesterday's misunderstanding, the natives are keeping their distance. Cook orders the ship brought closer to the shore, so it can be within range and have cannon trained on Point Venus, the name the Endeavour's men have called the spit of land on which they plan to build the fort. Friendly or unfriendly, the captain will complete his mission. It really is one of those things. On the night when the 17th of April meets the 18th of April, 1769, at 2 in the morning, the unfortunate artist Mr. Alexander Buchan, who back in Tierra del Fuego had suffered the epileptic fit which had so debilitated him, is struck down by another fit. Buchan's eyes roll back, leaving only the whites visible. Even as his tongue lolls out and his whole body shakes. The last time this happened, it had stopped after he was warmed by a fire. But now it just gets worse and worse and worse still. It is as though poor Buchan is possessed of an evil spirit that simply will not let him go until it has completely shaken the life out of him. From shaking violently, Buchan weakens to the point he can only shudder weakly until at last he lies, still. It is over. I sincerely regret him as an ingenious and good young man, Banks chronicles, but his loss to me is irretrievable. No, not because they are friends, and not because of Buchan's service of science, but for rather more selfish Banksian reasons. My airy dreams of entertaining my friends in England with the scenes that I am to see here are vanished. No account of the figures and dresses of men can be satisfactory unless illustrated with figures. Had Providence spared him a month longer, what an advantage would it have been to my undertakings? But I must submit. Yes, Banks must reflect as they commit Buchan to the deep for all eternity. Life can be cruel. Why couldn't Mr. Buchan have the decency to drop dead 30 days from now? So inconvenient. Good help is hard to find. Thankfully, Buchan is not the end of the line, and Banks shortly passes his duties on to the grieving Mr. Parkinson. Yes, I know you're here to draw and paint plants, but you can surely find some time to turn your hand towards people as well. Yes, sir, Mr. Banks, cold fish that you are. Every man, from the captain to the lowest mess hand, tries to decipher the riddles of the Tahitian way of life. The white men are yet to fathom the finer details of the Tahitian justice system, but they know there are complex and enforced rules in place, even if there is no written legal code. Certain penalties, from long usage and ancient custom, records Midshipman James Margra, apply to certain crimes or misdemeanours. For example, those who steal clothes or arms are commonly put to death, either by hanging or drowning in the sea. But those who steal provisions are punished by such things as having the soles of their feet caned. By this practice, they wisely vary the punishment of the same crime when committed from different motives, judging perhaps that he who steals cloth and arms steals because he is either idle or avaricious, qualities which probably will always continue with the offender, to the disturbance of society. But he who steals from hunger is impelled by one of the most importunate desires of nature, and will not offend again, unless the same impulse recurs, which it is not likely will happen. In some ways, thus, their legal system is more advanced than the English one, as it actually takes into account the motive for the crime. In England, justice is blind and proud of it. In Tahiti, it has both eyes open, wanting to work out why someone has misbehaved. Their religion is similarly gentle, and Joseph Banks is bemused to learn a Tahitian belief concerning the afterlife, which is typically sunny. For you see, for them, even hell is fairly wonderful. It's just not quite so wonderful as heaven. Heaven they describe as a place of great happiness, and hell is only a place enjoying less of the luxuries of life.
This ends CD 7. CD 8.
18th of April, 1769, Point Venus. Work and play, night and day. Now, ordinarily, when you needed men to work like navvies, Navy navvies were among the best. With no means of escape on a ship, operating under the Articles of War, which would see them lashed if they disobeyed an order to work hard, you could count on them to set to with a will. But here on Tahiti, 5 days after they have arrived, when most of the men are relaxing, bathing, eating, drinking and making love to Tahitian maidens, rounding enough of them up to begin building the fort, to put walls and obstacles where the lines have been marked around the tent, is not quite as easy. And nor, once they are set to work, do they go at it with much enthusiasm. Some were employed in throwing up entrenchment, Captain Cook records, while others were cutting fay signs, piquets, etc. To Cook's surprise, rather than protest from the natives on this first afternoon of building, they are more than happy to lend some elbow grease and great grunt, lugging materials and provisions out of the forest and up to the construction site. Cook interrupts the work of his men, already dripping with sweat, despite the early morning hour, to reiterate no tree must be cut down without getting permission from the natives first. The men nod, grunt, and wipe the perspiration from their brows. They understand, though it does seem very odd to care about what the natives think. They continue digging, sawing, lugging, and hammering. Meanwhile, the armourer and his mates set up the forge not far from the fort's construction site and begin the work of repairing all the ship's ironwork. Axes are honed, attracting a crowd of natives who watch the sparks fly in wonder. As to the design of the fort, Cook orders his men to dig a deep, wide moat around the northern, western and southern sides of the building. The eastern side is to be bordered by the river. The point of the exercise is to guarantee a completely tranquil and secure environment in which the precious astronomical instruments can be set up to record the transit of Venus, which is now just 6 weeks away. It is effectively a secure compound, plenty of space for tents, a kitchen, and pens for sheep and goat, able to sustain and support the Endeavour cohort whose job it will be to mind the fort. "My tents were got up before night," Mr. Banks chronicles, "and I slept ashore in them for the first time. The lines were guarded round by many sentries, but no Indian attempted to come near them during the whole night. Well, no Indian men, anyway. Mr. Banks welcomes visitors of the fairer sex, who the sentinels allow into the construction area, no questions asked. As it happens, there is no shortage of volunteers to live and work on the island, and for very good reason, as Cook will later note, the local women are so very liberal with their favours that it is worth working all day if you can enjoy their charms all night. Why are these women so available? The sailors have no clue, and no time to ask. Again. The women are riddles to which there is no answer. But what glorious, stunning riddles they are. Back home, to get a good woman into bed with you required a commitment of marriage, together with a good 10 minutes to get her corsets and all the rest off, while women of more ill repute could be got into bed for 2 shillings. But here in Tahiti, they're all just good women, ready to be bad at a moment's notice, ready, willing, and amazingly able. As a matter of fact, far abler than the Tars themselves. Indeed, quietly, the Tahitian women suspect these white men have no women among their own kind, for if they did, why on earth would they sail the seas without them? Who ever heard of such a thing? That would explain, among other things, their complete ignorance of carnal pleasures. So the women take it upon themselves to take control, slowing these randy white men down from their absurd, desperate, percussive, hammering rhythm into the way it was all meant to be done, the way a palm tree sways back and forth in a very light breeze, slowly, sensually, like a flowing dance, with lightly swaying hips, a flowing dance, and, well, the men have never felt anything like it. Again. Nearly all of the Endeavour's officers and gentlemen are equally enamoured of the local delights, and partake heavily, except for Richard Orton, the much-hated personal clerk of Captain Cook, who, as William Perry will recount, displays some presentiment of evil from a consciousness of universal hatred extended towards him, for whilst at an anchor during our long stay in Tahiti, when the captain and better half the ship's company were ashore, he was always afraid to sleep in the great cabin alone. Not that Captain Cook is ever ashore for anything other than proper purposes. He has no experience at all with the local women. Happily married to dear Elizabeth, waiting for him back in England with their 4 children, that is all he cares for himself. Beyond everything else, even if he were disposed to be unfaithful, Cook is mindful of the delicate art of diplomacy. If he sleeps with one chief's wife, then all the other chiefs' wives would, well, that is a challenge Mr. Banks can meet, if he pleases. But James Cook's faithfulness to his wife places him in a tiny minority, as Sidney Parkinson will note. Most of our ship's company procured temporary wives amongst the natives, with whom they occasionally cohabited, an indulgence which even many reputed virtuous Europeans allow themselves in uncivilized parts of the world with impunity, as if a change of place altered the moral turpitude of fornication. And what is a sin in Europe is only a simple innocent gratification in America, which is to suppose that the obligation to chastity is local and restricted only to particular parts of the globe. Joseph Banks' flame of the month is Tia Tia, a fine Grecian girl. Lieutenant John Gore is head over heels and more for Mrs. Turaro. Master Molyneux cannot get enough of Tiari, while Charlie Clerk spends every available minute with Hotai, and Sidney Parkinson does the same with Piari. Yes, even devout Quakers like Sidney Parkinson cannot resist the lures of the flesh in Tahiti. Charles Green? Yes, he has been mournful over dear Elizabeth, his new bride he has left behind in London, but he has found solace with Turarua, sometimes twice a night, and occasionally in the afternoon. Of the officers and gentlemen, it is really only Surgeon Monkhouse who sleeps alone. Just him and his snuff-box, though not from choice. There is just something about his droopy jowl and sad hound dog features that the native women find unattractive, and it means he couldn't find a root in a mangrove swamp. As for Captain Cook, he is quietly appalled by his men's sexual proclivities with the Tahitian women, knowing what shameful distemper it could unleash among all who partake. Being noisily appalled would be beside the point, because trying to stop what is going on would be like trying to hold back a king tide by standing on the beach and putting his hands out. He would have as much success in this regard as had King Canute. All he can really do is register his disapproval, so at least the Admiralty will know what lies in wait for future expeditions to these parts. "One amusement or custom more I must mention," he writes. "Both sexes express the most indecent ideas in conversation without the least emotion, and they delight in such conversation beyond any other. Chastity, indeed, is but little valued, especially among the middle people. If a wife is found guilty of a breach of it, her only punishment is a beating from her husband. The men will very readily offer the young women to strangers, even their own daughters, and think it very strange if you refuse them. But this is done merely for the sake of gain." Joseph Banks has no such qualms. Quite the reverse. He records his own learned scientific opinion with an entirely different tone. "I have nowhere seen," he writes in his journal, "such elegant women as those of Tahiti." And if Captain Cook takes that attitude, well, Joseph Banks is so happy to help himself to the humble Yorkshireman's share, and more. In fact, he likely sets new records for Congress. For yes, though already handsomely educated at all of Harrow, Eton, and Oxford, his doctorate in love takes place in Tahiti, and he applies himself to his studies as never before, thankful for the heavy practical component with a lot of outdoor activity. Yes, Joseph Banks, now living ashore each night, has plenty to learn, and is dedicated to the methodical practical study of such charms by turning his tent into the Tahitian equivalent of his Chelsea home back in London, hosting gatherings, only his tent is more intimate. Soon enough, the chief Lycurgus and his wives move from the western side of Matavai Bay closer to where the whites are building their fort, bringing with them all their household furniture, and even houses to be erected in our neighbourhood. Banks becomes ever more intimate with them every day. "Lycurgus dined with us," he chronicles on the 20th of April. "He imitates our manners in every instance, already holding a knife and fork more handily than a Frenchman could learn to do in years." And so the white men on shore fall into a routine. Bouncing between the ship and the half-constructed fort, they share meals and trade sexual favours with the natives in the evening, only to rise the next morning to trade food and tools. Lieutenant Gore superintends relations with the natives out at the ship, while Banks is in charge at the fort. "A nail for a fish? Yes, thank you. How about a single bead for breadfruit? Done." The terms of trade spring up even in paradise, as an amused Sidney Parkinson notes of the new Iron Age. "The rates or terms on which we trafficked with the natives were a spike for a small pig, a smaller for a fowl, a hatchet for a hog, and 20 coconuts or breadfruit for a middling-sized nail." But, as ever, Mr. Banks focuses on the broader picture and on beauty. In the island of Tahiti, Joseph Banks opines, where love is the chief occupation, the favourite, nay, almost the sole luxury of the inhabitants, both the bodies and souls of the women are modelled in the utmost perfection for that soft science. Helping them achieve that perfection is a plant known to the Tahitians as tiare. It is a gorgeous white flower that grows only in the highlands and is used to infuse coconut oil for use in lovemaking. Banks comes across it one night when, lying naked and spent by his current Tahitian flame, His own flame flickering on the edge of exhaustion, she reaches into a special coconut shell she keeps by her mat and soon draws her dripping fingers over his shuddering body. For yes, just a few drops of this fragrant oil somehow makes him shake and shiver, just as the stroke of her oily hands makes him relax as he breathes deep of this potent perfume, and his strength returns and rises once more. Afterwards he realizes her purpose has been not just his reinvigoration, but, just as it is for all the Tahitian women, the oil is the best way to mask the overpowering smell of the dirty white men. Either way, for Joseph Banks it is heaven in a coconut shell, combining his twin passions, with a blessed plant enhancing his sexual experience. Surgeon Monkhouse has become irritated watching his former chum Banks dedicating every spare moment to swaggering around the beach with the prettiest ladies, hips thrust forward and positively reeking of the love potion. Surgeon Monkhouse knows that Banks has no time for him. But why does he get all the girls? The surgeon longs to be anointed with the oil, and every day he is not, his resentment grows, and his face becomes even droopier. By the 22nd of April, just 5 days after starting, Captain Cook's observatory on Point Venus, which the men christen Fort Venus, is shaping up enough that more tents can be erected inside. This day, Cook records proudly, we mounted 6 swivels at the fort, which was now nearly finished. This struck the natives with some fear, and some fishermen who lived upon the point moved farther off. By about now there are some 45 sailors, marines, midshipmen and officers sleeping at Fort Venus, about half the ship's company. Using a mishmash of sign language and charades, Captain Cook does his best to explain to Oaha and the gathering group that he has come from beyond the horizon, all the way from Britain, Brittany, points over the ocean towards the eastern horizon, to observe, points at his eyes, Venus, points to the sky. Venus. Do you know Venus? Of course they know Venus, the brightest object in the southern night sky. She is Tauruanui, named for the beautiful eldest daughter of the mother of all the stars, Atea, herself the sun. Cook is fascinated as the Tahitians teach him something of their own astronomical knowledge. They compute time by the moon, which they call Malama, reckoning 30 days to each moon, 2 of which they say the moon is Matei, that is, dead, and this is at the time of the new moon, when she cannot be seen. The day they divide into smaller portions, not less than 2 hours. Their computations is by units, tens, and scores, up to 10 score, or 200, etc. In counting, they generally take hold on their fingers one by one, shifting from one hand to the other until they come to the number they want to express. But if it be a high number, instead of their fingers, they use pieces of leaves, etc. But what do you want from Tauruanui? Cook does his best, but there is simply no hope of explaining the upcoming transit, though they do grasp it is something to do with Atea, the sun. The Tahitians, meanwhile, are making headway in distinguishing the white men from each other. At first, all the white men, at least those wearing the same rough uniform, all looked remarkably alike. As to the different names of the whites, as Mr. Banks notes, the Indians find so much difficulty in pronouncing them that we are forced to indulge them in calling us what they please, or rather what they say when they attempt to pronounce them. Captain Cook becomes Toot, Banks is Tapane, Dr. Solander becomes Torano, Lieutenant Hicks is Hete, Gore is Mr. Toraro, Surgeon Monkhouse becomes Mato, and Master Molyneux is called Boba, from his Christian name Robert. In this manner, Banks writes, they have names for almost every man in the ship. And of course the array of extraordinary characters the crew meet in this wonderful place continues to grow. On the morning of the 28th of April, Captain Cook is busily filling out his log in the great cabin when Master Molyneux knocks and enters with a tall, fair-skinned Tahitian woman, crowned with a dramatic headdress. It is, he will come to learn, a tomu, 6 long strands of threaded human hair anchored to her own that, if laid out, would go for almost a mile long. The whole extraordinary ensemble is wrapped in the finest cloth Cook has yet seen on this island. Who is this? This is the Dolphin's Queen Oberea, the master announces rather grandly, at which Cook stands and goes through the appropriate motions when meeting a queen. Her reputation has preceded him. For this, of course, is the great queen spoken so highly of by the Dolphin's men. The captain begins with a special gift, presenting Queen Oberea with a child's doll that she is soon cooing over, almost as if it were her own baby. She appeared to be about 40, Banks writes, noting her tall and very lusty, her skin white and her eyes full of meaning. She might have been handsome when young, but now few or no traces of it were left. Cook and Queen Oberea are taken ashore, where this once great queen tells the visiting captain she has presents waiting. A hog and several bunches of plantains. These she caused to be carried from her canoes up to the fort in a kind of procession, she and I bringing up the rear. As the ceremonies and rites roll on, Oberea beams to find herself the centre of attention once more, just as in days of yore. It lasts until the glowering King Tutaha, Hercules, arrives midst his flanking flotilla of canoes. Walking ashore, surrounded by his warriors, he grandly approaches the fort and stops just shy of the gathered crowd, though there is nothing shy in the way he looks at Oberea. It is a glare that transcends language barriers. Oberea, still buoyed by the high regard these white men have bathed her in, shows Tutaha the child's doll with a flirtatious flash of the eyes, a gesture which only makes him stand taller, his face angrier than ever. Cook, ever the diplomat, dispatches a man to the ship to retrieve another child's doll, a gift the captain then hands to the chief. He appears placated, mildly. Crisis averted, but Cook is beginning to understand how it works around here. Whatever Queen Oberea once was, she is no longer. She is head or chief of her own tribe or family, he records, but to all appearance hath no authority over the rest of the inhabitants, whatever she might have had when the Dolphin was here. Oberea, the queen that was, and King Tutaha, the real power in this land. Hercules, Cook records for the Admiralty, whose real name is Tutaha, is to all appearance the chief man of the island. Cook and Banks come to understand that Arcadia is in fact 2 realms, or districts, each ruled by a chief of chiefs, an Era Dei in Tahitian, or a queen or king, as the British prefer to think of it. Each of these realms is divided into smaller districts, or whenuas, as the Tahitians call them, and at the head of each is a chief, or era. Mysteries abound in this strange land, though what is what, who is who, and how it all works is at least slowly becoming apparent. 29th of April, 1769. Matavai Bay, more lashings of leather. Chief Tuburai, Lycurgus, is aggrieved. The ship's butcher, Henry Jeffs, has threatened to cut the throat of the chief's wife, Tamayo, with a hatchet. He tells Joseph Banks, who, upon seeing guilt writ large in the butcher's demeanour, is appalled, and promises that he will see Jeffs punished. As good as his word, Banks tells Captain Cook, who is very aggrieved. The firmest rule he has while in Tahiti is for his men to treat the natives well. It is at the top of the list of the rules hanging on the mainmast, for goodness sake. To endeavour by every fair means to cultivate a friendship with the natives, and to treat them with all imaginable humanity. Those who flout that rule must face the consequences, and be seen to face the consequences in front of the offended natives. That is why, once Cook is satisfied the accusation is sound, Jeffs is placed in chains below. And now, without giving the chief and his wife any warning of what awaits, the captain has invited them onto the Endeavour. Once they are in place, aft, sitting by Joseph Banks, and all the ship's company are assembled, as for every flogging, Jeffs is hauled up through the hatchway, blinking in the sunlight, and after his shirt is removed, tied to the rigging, so his back is exposed. After Captain Cook makes a quick speech explaining how the rules are as clear as the consequences for those who break them, he gives the nod. "Mr. Guthrie, if you please." Expertly, Guthrie draws the cat-o'-nine-tails out of its red bag, steps forward, brings the cat back behind his head, and whistles it forward. At the first explosion of leather against the butcher's skin there is a cry, but it comes not from the recalcitrant sailor, but the chief's wife, Tamayo. The woman, Master Molyneux chronicles, was in the greatest agonies and strongly interceded for him. So too her husband, the chief. Both had been upset, but not so upset that they wished to see such cruelty. Which is regrettable, but it changes nothing. The two go on, Banks chronicles, begging the punishment might cease, a request which the captain would not comply with. How strange are these white beings! They shoot a man who crosses a line in the sand, yet whip a man who stands still. Strange indeed. For his part, Captain Cook is thrilled with the fort. Perhaps the natives struggled with the line Cook's men had drawn in the sand, but surely they would understand this. With guns in place and all in working order, on the afternoon of the 1st of May, he and Mr. Green bring ashore the astronomical equipment, including the quadrant, consisting of a telescope and a heavy metal quarter-circle arc, still packed safely in its case, since England, and other instruments like telescopes, looking-glasses, and the astronomical clock. With enormous care, the clock is placed at one end of a larger tent, facing the observatory, with its wooden base dug into the earth to make sure it is absolutely stable. Exactly 12 feet away, in the observatory and facing the clock, a large cask is filled with wet sand to make it equally unmoving, and upon this, when the time comes, will be placed the quadrant. The essence of the observatory is quickly set up, with the larger instruments placed on stable foundations in a locked-off environment. With the transit of Venus just a little over 4 weeks away, Captain Cook has every right to be satisfied. "I now thought myself perfectly secure," he records. Captain Cook is eager to at last bring the observatory up to working order. There is but one thing left to do. Moving from the great tent to the smaller, round one, only 12 feet away, Cook and his men walk up to the feature in the middle of the room. It is the heavy cask, fixed to the ground, filled to overflowing with heavy wet sand. In order to keep it stable, they will affix the astronomical quadrant to this cask, fast and firm and hold on. "Captain, the case feels too light. Where is the quadrant?" Cook is appalled. His one quadrant is missing. How can this be? How can something so precious, so big, packed up in a box inside its case and held under armed guard, a sentinel not 5 yards away from this tent, in there for less than a day now, be, yes, stolen? Without it, no observations of the transit of any worth may be made, and they all will have wasted 2 years of their lives for naught. Cook wastes no time in placing a bounty on the missing object, and word soon arrives from the fort by way of Oberea that the quadrant has been taken eastward. It was taken in the night, taken by a native, under the cover of darkness. Mr. Banks and Mr. Green arm themselves with muskets and go to find Chief Tuberai, who they meet on the riverbank coming to them with news. He picks up 3 small twigs and arranges them into a triangle shape, resting on his palm. Yes, the quadrant's tripod. Tuberai knows where the quadrant is. No time to waste, Banks tells Tuberai. He must instantly go with me to the place where it was. And so Tuberai joins them in the hunt. As they pass homes and abodes, Tuburai draws the panting white men to a halt, inquiring after the thief by name. Moroamea! Where is he? Every native they pass points the party eastward. The search races on, until Tuburai halts the procession and motions to a hill some 3 miles away. The white men are told, "You are not to expect the instrument till we get there." Banks can't help but note that there are no arms among us but a pair of pocket pistols, which I always carried, going at least 7 miles from our fort, where the Indians might not be quite so submissive as at home, going also to take from them a prize for which they had ventured their lives. Banks sends back the midshipman to inform the captain and request some assistance, armed. Cook turns to Lieutenant Hicks. There are to be no more canoes leaving the bay, and if anyone so much as attempts it, detain them. Understood? Yes, Captain, but with one caveat. If Tutaha comes either to the ship or the fort, he is not to be detained. The Marines and the captain move off into the woods. Tuburai turns to stone. The great chief has been striding through the island like a titan, though just as quickly he is still an instant statue. He has heard something. His arm raises slowly, deliberately. There, Banks sees over Tuburai's shoulder a native man, polished metal shining in his hands, the missing quadrant. A rapid report of pistol fire cracks out from Banks, and the natives scatter far and wide. Then, using the butt of the very same gun, he marks a circle in the dirt beneath him. This is my space. You lot, keep to yourselves. The natives need not be told twice, and respect his wishes. They behaved with all the order imaginable, Banks records, though we quickly had some hundreds surrounding a ring we had marked out. Only after receiving permission thus does one of Tuburai's warriors carefully cross the line and carefully place a packing box at the feet of Mr. Banks. Mr. Green rushes to open it, only to find, as Sidney Parkinson records, some of the natives had taken it to pieces. And Mr. Green is infinitely relieved to inform Banks that they do indeed have the most crucial parts, and what is missing can be fashioned in the forge of the armourer. Their mission survives. So, records the triumphant Joseph Banks, we packed all up in grass as well as we could and proceeded homewards. An affray in the bay. How dare they? Restrained and escorted by armed guards under the command of Lieutenant Gore, the outraged King Tutaha is being led up the beach towards the fort. This sort of treatment is an affront to his mana, his power and prestige. Lieutenant Gore brings the king to Lieutenant Hicks, who is perplexed. Can the always headstrong and hasty Gore really have detained the king, despite Captain Cook's specific instructions forbidding any such action? Well, Lieutenant Gore? Gore explains in muted tones so as not to raise any further alarm. He had sent the yawl, filled with sailors, in hot pursuit of a double canoe that was busy trying to escape the bay. Boatswain John Gathray had led the furious chase, only to find that when they came alongside the fleeing canoe, every one of the natives had dived overboard. And there, among the messy mass of Tahitians swimming back to shore, the boatswain had squinted to see King Tutaha. Well, what else was there to do but take the man back to shore? So acted John Gathray, and thus Tutaha had come into Lieutenant Gore's custody, and as a result he had thought it the prudent thing to bring him back to the fort, to you, Lieutenant Hicks. He was my problem, now he is our problem. And very soon he will be Captain Cook's problem too, for he is on his way. What is going on? Captain Cook and his Marines, now in the company of Mr. Banks, Mr. Green, and Tuburai, with whom they have met up, all happy that the quadrant has been retrieved, have no sooner come within sight of the fort than they can hear wailing. And it is getting louder now, more agonized with every step closer they take. Actual screams, wrenching sobs. What is going on? It is a mourning mob massed in front of the fort gate. Cook strides in to find the distressed King Tutaha sitting on his haunches. King Tuburai follows Cook, and, quite touchingly it must be said, the two Tahitian kings immediately fall into each other's arms. They wept over each other for some time, Cook records. As for Tutaha, he was so far prepossessed with the thought that he was to be killed that he could not be made sensible. Even news that he is to be released is not enough to console him. Cook quickly orders King Tutaha returned to his people, and he is carried out of the fort to the people, many of whom expressed their joy by embracing. After all, Cook chronicles, he would not go away until he had given us 2 hogs, notwithstanding we did all in our power to hinder him. For it is very certain that the treatment he had met with from us did not merit such a reward. However, we had it in our power to make him a present of equal value whenever we pleased. Gore explains himself to his furious captain, not remotely with the level of apology needed in the Englishman's view, but either way the damage is done, both to the dignity of Tutaha and to James Cook's opinion of Lieutenant Gore. It is a wound that will linger. The Englishmen have been working these past 5 days without a peep from the natives. No spectators, no visitors, no lovely ladies coming by to distract the men of the Endeavour. Captain Cook knows instinctively that the kidnapping of Tutaha has done precisely the damage he feared it would do. To shoot one of the men who had stolen a gun, that was one thing, and seemingly something the natives had begrudgingly tolerated. But to kidnap their king, to dishonour and disrespect Tutaha, a man who had been so good to them, yes, the Tahitians are now reluctant to spend time near any white men, refusing to bring their produce to the fort or ship. Cook catches neither sight nor sound of Tuburai, much less Tutaha. But in the void that has formed in the time since the king's kidnapping, one Tahitian sees his chance. Tupaia, a tall older gentleman and right-hand man to the pretender Queen Oberea, begins to spend his time around the fort. He is seemingly the only native on the island unfazed by the kidnapping of Tutaha. A charismatic fellow and a bridge between the British and the natives, Tupaia could not have come into the picture at a better time. Tupaia soon becomes a key figure in the circle of Banks's intimates, advising Banks on the properties of plants and herbs, and showing Surgeon Monkhouse ancient local remedies of startling effectiveness, showing Sidney Parkinson the Tahitian manner of art, from sculpture to making paper from bark, tapa, as it is called, to the use of dyes for painting and tattoo. Parkinson is so impressed by the priest's skills, he begins to teach Tupaia how to draw in the European fashion. It isn't long before Tupaia's name and face are known by every man on the Endeavour. He seems to be a friend to everybody, this good priest, Tupaia. Not least among his newfound companions is James Cook, who recognises with surprise and delight that Tupaia is a navigator, not just of boast but of knowledge, a man who can draw islands Cook has seen, and, tantalisingly, ones he has not, with a confidence and consistency that simply amazes the captain. Perhaps King Tutaha is a little concerned with just how Tupaia's influence is growing, and resolves to reach a peaceful accord with the English, lest his own standing fall too far. A feast, then, a great banquet in honour of resuming their relationship, and followed by a public wrestling match, no less. With peace comes trade, and the morning after the feast everyone is bleary-eyed from a long night of revelry, and no one more, Cook notes, than Master Molyneux, a glutton for food, drink, and women. With everything back to normal, the men of the Endeavour breathe a collective sigh of relief. Paradise continues, and Venus awaits. Chapter 7. Transit of Venus. Not a cloud was to be seen the whole day, and the air was perfectly clear. so that we had every advantage we could desire in observing the whole of the passage of the planet Venus over the sun's disk. James Cook, 3rd of June, 1769. 10th of May, 1769. Matavai Bay, O Tahiti. The natives who watch Captain Cook are 2 parts mesmerised to 3 parts confused. What is Toot doing? Actual physical labour? Yes. Extraordinary. Their own chiefs are so disinclined to exert themselves, they have servants to feed them their meals. But here is Toot with a shovel in his hands, labouring away and planting seeds, which he has brought bottled up all the way from Mile End, London. With every swing of the hoe, the soil loosens. Cook stoops to place a single seed in each small divot, a tamarind tree here, an orange tree there. Again, the Tahitians are confused, for they lack nothing in the way of fruit or trees. But Cook insists. If the measure of a good man is to plant a tree under which he knows he will never sit in the shade of, the Englishman surely qualifies, as in this case he goes one better, wanting the Tahitians to enjoy the fruits of his labours, even though he will be very unlikely to eat those fruits with them. Very well, Toot. Let us see what we reap from the seeds you sow. O Tahiti, how the Endeavour men love thee! It is another typical mid-May day in paradise, and it looks like it will be another night there too for Joseph Banks, accompanied by a rather excessive number of young ladies, at least to the mind of Surgeon Monkhouse. To the medico's considerable chagrin, the botanist has managed to make a constant flame of Oberea's pretty handmaiden, the delicious Tia for Tutu, and still, the botanist is receiving constant overtures from the lusty queen. Why, damn it, and how does bloody Banks get all these ladies to himself? Can he not perhaps share or guide a lovely creature towards, say, Surgeon Monkhouse? But no, Mr. Banks is not inclined to share beauty. Physician, heal thyself. Mr. Banks is busy with the busty and lusty, and not in the giving vein today. As for the astronomer, Mr. Charles Green, he finds that beer, rum help soothe his guilt about his adultery, and, well, help inspire more of it. It is a vicious circle, but it's not the 7th circle of hell. It's an enjoyable one. 28th of May, 1769. Matavai Bay. Heavens above, Haivas below. Joseph Banks has received an intriguing offer from Queen Oberea that he may sleep in her canoe if he wishes. Mr. Banks, the captain, and the doctor are sleeping for the night on the other side of the bay, where they have feasted on hogs with King Tutaha and the former queen. I acquainted my fellow travellers with my good fortune, and wishing them as good, took my leave, records Banks. Arriving at the former queen's communal sleeping canoe, Banks strips off his coat and waistcoat, his shoes, socks, shirt and breeches, the lot, until he can feel the air on his skin. The night is balmy, calm and carefree. The warmth in the air is liberating, freeing. The botanist will sleep naked tonight. And why shouldn't he? The Queen now requests Banks's clothes. She assures him she will keep them safe. Good. One fewer thing to worry about on this peaceful night. Otherwise they will certainly be stolen, she warns Banks. Very well then. I readily submitted and laid down to sleep with all imaginable tranquillity. Banks wakes to relieve himself in the middle of the night. The night is so dark it must be near that hour when the sun can make no impression from either end of the day, the most wee of all wee hours, which is what he needs to do right now. Rolling over to where Oberea had placed his clothes, Banks fumbles in the inky darkness for his trousers and belt, only to find nothing. Not his trousers, not his coat, not even his pistols and powder horn. "Oberea!" he roars, then sees her familiar figure sit bolt upright with a start, a yard further down the canoe. "Where are my clothes?" Banks begins a barrage of complaints and accusations, carrying along loudly enough to wake Tutaha sleeping in the next canoe along. Rising simultaneously is Tupaia, the charismatic priest, moving to Banks's side shortly after waking. Tupaia's loyalty is without question. Queen Oberea calls for firelight before disappearing into the night with Tutaha in tow. They are determined to find the missing robes. Feeling rather vulnerable and naked, Banks checks for his musket, eager for some reminder of his rank and position, something to signify who he is, who he thought he was when he fell asleep. He finds the firearm, gripping the handle tightly, thank God, only it's empty. Banks has forgotten to load it, and it is far too late and dark to find anybody and bother them for ammunition. Banks is defenceless. All he can do now is wait, and wait, and wait some more, silent in the darkness. Oberea and Tutaha return within the hour, bearing absolutely nothing. Damn it! If everything is going to go belly up anyway, the botanist thinks it better to lie down and sleep. Wiser that than worrying endlessly in the middle of the night. Only sleep is impossible, as no sooner does Banks rest his head than he hears the sound of what must be music. Faint, but definitely the rhythm and tempo of the islanders' music. How odd. Rising again, Joseph Banks sees light in the distance. Not just one, but many. More than many. It is a glowing flock of brightness, brilliant pinpricks of light moving far off in the distance. Settling for a modest strip of cloth that Oberea has so generously provided in absence of decent clothes, Mr. Banks walks towards the light. Drawing up on the perimeter of a glowing circle, Banks realizes much of the light he could see is the natives' torches, the same familiar nut kernels on stakes filled with burning oil. Within the burning ring are 3 men, beating drums and a quartet of flautists. Though to say that the woodwinds and percussion instruments are a far cry from Banks's native British orchestras would be a laughable understatement. The drums are made of a hollow block of wood covered with shark's skin, and are beaten not with padded drumsticks, but the great black hands of the native men. Meanwhile, the flutes are made of hollow bamboo, about 15 inches long, in which are 3 holes, far less complicated looking than their Western counterparts. And yet, the way they are played seems more complex than anything Banks knows, and he has to look twice to confirm what Cook will later record. They blow with one nostril, stopping the other with the thumb of the left hand. The other 2 holes they stop and unstop with their fingers, and by this means produce 4 notes, of which they have made 1 tune. But the wonders do not stop at the instruments, as Banks's eyes are drawn to a group of 8 young women, dancing and writhing in a rhythmic fashion that remind Banks of things he'd rather be doing. He is transfixed by these sirens who sway and moan in the flickering light, moving to the sound of these strange instruments, when suddenly he spies a pair of less lustful eyes on the other side of the circle. The captain sits in silence, watching the spectacle before him, and betraying no emotion. What else can Banks do but walk over and recount his pitiful tale? Oberea took charge of my things, and yet they were stolen from her, he cries, as James Cook listens patiently. Far from being reprimanded, Banks is relieved to hear that the captain is no stranger to situations like these, and Cook commiserates as he says, "For my own part, I had my stockings taken from under my head, and yet I am certain that I was not asleep the whole time." Banks looks down to the captain's feet, thinking on the captain's story. He can't help but notice that the captain's legs are exposed to the night, 2 hairy white limbs that the botanist had not seen before. The captain responds with a subtle shrug, a rare display of amusement. There is a shared understanding between the two, a camaraderie that belies their situation and exists in spite of the fundamental differences between James and Joseph. They turn their heads away from one another and back to the illuminating performance in front of them. a heiva, the locals call it. From his observations, Cook has come to the conclusion that these musicians go about from house to house and play, and are always received and rewarded by the master of the family, who gives them a piece of cloth or whatever he can spare, for which they will stay 3 or 4 hours, during which time his house will be crowded full, for the people are extravagantly fond of this diversion. As for the young girls dancing, well, he can give them no points for modesty or common decency, but, credit where it is due, their knack for rhythm is incredible. He notes for the Admiralty that they sing most indecent songs and using most indecent actions, in the practice of which they are brought up from their earliest childhood. In doing this, they keep time to a great nicety. By the dim light of the perpetual flame common to most Tahitian communities, its wick made of rolled bark cloth and secreted from the wind, the midnight mystery concert draws to an end. Hairy-legged Cook and the near-nude Banks agree there's little to be done to recover their items tonight, and head back to their respective sleeping places. And yet the light of the risen sun reveals no trace, nor even news of the missing items. The men walk back to their waiting pinnace and are soon rowing north for Matavai Bay, carrying with them captain and botanist, both shattered from exhaustion, an unusually chipper Dr. Solander, for he has had a full night's slumber in a quiet hut some 1/2 mile distant from last night's festivities, and last but not least, a hog. All of them are lost in their own thoughts when they happen upon, well, what is it? It is a mass of lithe Tahitians in the water right where the surf is breaking onto the beach. But what in the name of God are they doing, if not risking their lives with every breaking wave? As the pinnace goes by, well clear of the breaking swell, Banks is able to take a closer look, writing later that night, "In our return to the boat, we saw the Indians amuse or exercise themselves in a manner truly surprising. It was in a place where the shore was not guarded by a reef, as is usually the case. Consequently, a high surf fell upon the shore, a more dreadful one I have not often seen. No European boat could have landed in it, and I think no European who had by any means got into it could possibly have saved his life, as the shore was covered with pebbles and large stones. In the midst of these breakers 10 or 12 Indians were swimming who, whenever a surf broke near them, dived under it with infinite ease, rising up on the other side. But their chief amusement was carried on by the stern of an old canoe. With this before them, they swam out as far as the outermost breach, then 1 or 2 would get into it, and opposing the blunt end to the breaking wave, were hurried in with incredible swiftness. Sometimes they were carried almost ashore, but generally the wave broke over them before they were halfway, in which case they dived and quickly rose on the other side with the canoe in their hands, which was towed out again, and the same method repeated. We stood admiring this very wonderful scene for full half an hour, in which time no one of the actors attempted to come ashore, but all seemed most highly entertained with their strange diversion. Joseph Banks has become the first man to record what will come to be called surfing. Like tattooing, it is a local curiosity that will surely not catch on. Early June 1769, Matavai Bay, when the stars align. After consulting with Tupaia, Captain Cook decides upon 2 additional observation points. A small island named Aimeo, some 20 miles to the west, and another on the eastern coast of Tahiti. We are now very busy in preparing our instruments, etc., for the observations, Cook records on the 29th of May, ahead of the 3rd of June transit, and instructing such gentlemen in the use of them, as I intend to send to other parts to observe, for fear we should fail here. So it goes that on the 1st of June, Captain Cook and Mr. Green bid farewell to Lieutenant Gore, Mr. Banks, and the good surgeon Monkhouse, as they are all rowed off in the longboat to Eimeo. For his part, Lieutenant Hicks is headed to the other location, to the east. "Fix upon some convenient situation," Cook orders, "and there observe the transit." Captain Cook and Mr. Green remain, pacing in and out of the tent to check the skies are clear, as the single chance in 200 years to solve the mysteries of the heavens draws near. 3rd of June, 1769, Point Venus, heavens above. The day dawns, crisp and clear. Gazing to the eastern sky, and then above, Captain Cook is infinitely relieved. All this time he has been keenly aware that it is quite possible to journey to the other side of the planet for a specific purpose, have prepared everything possible to make it a success, and see the whole thing come undone, simply because it might be a cloudy day. Mercifully, however, the sky is as favourable to our purpose as we could wish, though Cook finds himself distracted. The big clock, its base buried at the end of the tent, ticks ever closer to the time Venus will first appear against the sun, 9:21 a.m. The captain can scarcely draw his attention away. So long they have waited, such a journey it has already been. Tick, tick, tick. Yes, his reflecting telescope and that of Charles Green, with a magnifying power of 140 times that of the eye, is in readiness, positioned with the lenses pointing directly towards the sun. And yes, the white screen is positioned behind the telescopes, so as the light of the sun streams through, the men will be able to closely observe the reflected images and record the exact times that the black dot of Venus enters and exits the image of the sun, represented by the white circle of light. The screens have been situated at a distance the men deem optimum for their requirements, which gives a small image with sharp resolution. This is important, because we must be careful to try to discern between Venus's limb and its blurred penumbra, the lighter shading of shadow that hangs upon the outskirts of a darker shadow. And we also must be completely focused throughout the day to re-aiming our telescopes to keep track of the sun. We are ready, and only anxious now to get started. The day is already intolerably hot, which seems to make the clock tick more slowly as they wait for the big event. And there it is. Green first notices the small black dot showing up on the periphery of the sun, light thus on the sun's limb, at 9:21 a.m. and 45 seconds. 5 seconds later, Cook makes his own initial observation. The first visible appearance of Venus on the sun's limb at 9:21 a.m. and 50 seconds. And so begins the next 6 hours of very tight observation, with each moment of significance, penumbra and sun's limb in contact, small thread of light seen below the penumbra, faithfully recorded by each man. No matter that the temperature in the tent keeps climbing as the perspiration pours from them, still they keep to their posts, eyes on the screen, pencils to paper. Still the mercury climbs, as Venus transits, with the temperature at one point nudging 119 degrees Fahrenheit, 48.3 degrees Celsius. And still the observers barely blink. They have come a long way to get this exactly right, and there can be no distractions. As the transit comes to its close, Green notes last contact between Venus and the sun's limb at 3:31 p.m. and 28 seconds, while Cook records it as having finished 6 seconds earlier, at 3:31 p.m. and 22 seconds. Immediately Cook and Green compare their observations, disappointed to find they differ quite markedly. When they check the figures of Dr. Solander, who has also been observing from the fort with an even more powerful telescope, his timings differ further from both theirs, and, as Cook glumly records, all of their observations vary by much more than could be expected. What has gone wrong? There is less consensus among the three observers' data than a truly accurate reading would demand, though one oddity rings true for all of them. There was a dark shadow, an atmosphere or dusky shade around the body of the planet that appeared moments after contacts were observed. Such clear conditions, so perfect for an observation, all compromised by this dark and mysterious blur. Cook records his frustrations with the whims of the cosmos, stating it very much disturbed the times of the contact, particularly the two internal ones. In the meantime, the mood of Joseph Banks over on the island of Eimeo is decidedly upbeat. Having little interest in the whole transit of Venus affair, he has instead busied himself observing the transit of 3 mortal Venuses at sunset, recording his joy in his journal. 3 handsome girls came off in a canoe to see us. They chatted with us very freely, and with very little persuasion agreed to send away their carriage and sleep in the tent, a proof of confidence which I have not before met with upon so short an acquaintance. Oh yes, it was for good reason that the men of the Dolphin had crowned this place Aphrodite's Isle, and now there is a new Greek god. Joseph Banks, Esquire, is the mighty Adonis. And so, as Captain Cook through the night focuses on the movements of heavenly bodies, so too does Banks. Each man is satisfied he has performed to the best of his abilities, but only Banks is confident his abilities are so fine that there are requests for yet more encores, noting in the morning we prepared ourselves to depart, in spite of the entreaties of our fair companions, who persuaded us much to stay. In the meantime, others on the Endeavour have been so eager to have their own share of the charms of the Tahitian women that, as Banks chronicles on the day after the transit, we heard the melancholy news that a large part of our stock of nails had been purloined by some of the ship's company during the time of the observation, when everybody was ashore who had any degree of command. It is a gross breach of one of the specific orders that Captain Cook had posted on the mainmast before arriving in Tahiti. No sort of iron or anything that is made of iron, or any sort of cloth or any other useful or necessary articles are to be given in exchange for anything but provisions. And in reaction to such wanton misuse of nails for females, Cook reacts quickly and without mercy. In short order, the culprit is detected, and a quivering seaman, Archibald Wolfe, is strapped to the grating before the entire ship's company realizes the cat is let out of the bag. That is, the cat o' nine tails is taken out of the red baize bag where it hangs in the mess deck and brought upstairs, where Wolfe eyes it with terror pure before being given 24 lashes. The crew wince with every whipping blow. It is a cruel thing to lead them to this nirvana, bursting with beautiful women and nature, only to be told that if they let nature take its course, a bleeding back will be their reward. The transit now behind them, Captain Cook retires to his private cabin, takes the key from his inside breast pocket, sits on his haunches, and clicks open the thick padlock on the strongbox chained to the floor. For yes, it is time to open his sealed instructions from the Admiralty. Only now does he formally find out the second part of his mission, though he has long had a fair idea of it. Taking his paper knife to the red wax of the Admiralty seal, he carefully opens the thick white envelope to reveal the single sheet of paper that contains his instructions. Secret additional instructions for Lieutenant James Cook. You are to proceed to the southward in order to make discovery of the unknown southern continent, until you arrive in the latitude of 40 degrees. But not having discovered it or any evident sign of it, you are to proceed in search of it to the westward, between the latitude aforementioned and the latitude of 35 degrees, until you discover it, or fall in with the eastern side of the land discovered by Tasman and now called New Zealand. The Admiralty instructs him to observe the nature of the soil and the products thereof, the beasts and fowls that inhabit or frequent it, the fissures that are to be found, and in case you find any mines, minerals, or valuable stones, you are to bring home specimens of each, as also such specimens of the seeds of the trees, fruits, and grains as you may be able to collect. The Admiralty further instructs James Cook to observe the genius, temper, disposition, and number of the natives, if there be any, and endeavour by all proper means to cultivate a friendship and alliance with them, making them presents of such trifles as they may value, inviting them to traffic, and showing them every kind of civility and regard. Taking care, however, not to suffer yourself to be surprised by them. Yes, these are wide-ranging instructions, not least of which are the next lines Cook reads. You are also, with the consent of the natives, to take possession of convenient situations in the country in the name of the King of Great Britain. Take possession of the land? If my lords say so. Captain Cook has previously done his best to take possession of a French ship of war, and even a French city. At least there were people to claim possession from. What if in this case you find the place uninhabited? My lords have thought of that. In that case, take possession for His Majesty by setting up proper marks and inscriptions, as first discoverers and possessors. If you don't find the continent at all, you will head towards New Zealand and carefully observe the latitude and longitude in which that land is situated, and explore as much of the coast as the condition of the bark, the health of her crew, and the state of your provisions will admit of. A long journey on the unknown open ocean awaits. James Cook, whose eye has been cast beyond the known horizon ever since he was a lad, and whose ambition has brought him to the brink of just such a journey of discovery, can hardly wait. It is nothing less than his long-time dream coming true, sailing off into unknown territory. The last English captains given the task, foul-weather Jack Byron and Captain Wallace, had declined to go too far south without knowing what they may find in terms of safe harbour and supplies. But this mariner has no hesitation. He will indeed go south, and he gets straight to the business of victualling and preparing the Endeavour for its next leg, the first real exploring in unknown waters they are to embark upon. Within hours, the Knights of the Tarbrush, as the tars are sometimes jocularly referred to, are using the substance for which they have been named as they ladle boiling hot tar from the kettle, mix it with oakum, and force the lot into the ship's seams. Early June 1769, Matavai Bay, untempered distemper. Oh dear. There is a problem, Captain. Yes? The venereal distemper has spread itself over the greatest part of the ship's company, reports Surgeon Monkhouse, regretfully, his own appendage burning in his breeches. Perhaps he shouldn't have striven to emulate Banks's example. The pox, sir. Chancres on the genitals, oozing pus, bouts of burning, stints of scratching. Many of the Tahitian women are displaying the symptoms too. The good news is that after 3 months of fresh fruit, fresh greens, newly slaughtered meat, and bountiful clean water, there is no further trace of scurvy among any of the crew. The bad news is that many of the crew are pissing razor blades, as the expression goes. "Call the boatswain there," orders Captain Cook. "Mr. Gathray, pipe all hands to the doctor." Again the sailors effectively move to the tune of the whistle, and within minutes are silently, if sullenly, lined up in front of the surgeon's mate, William Perry, who looks carefully askance at both Captain Cook and Surgeon William Monkhouse, who have asked him to do this lowest of all low medical tasks. Actually, it does not surprise him that Surgeon Monkhouse should assign him this task. Mr. Perry feels that Monkhouse is often jealous of his abilities, and can often be a bit of a prick when he feels like it. Speaking of which, for he in turn now places his hands very carefully on all the sailors and officers. Every man must undo his fly and pull out his penis, at which point Perry, who in recent times has been assiduously studying An Introduction to Physiology by Malcolm Fleming, MD, the medical book he has brought with him that covers this procedure, places one hand on the base of the penis and with the thumb and forefinger of the other hand, delicately placed, moves it down the shaft of the penis to see if there's any emission of pus. Finally it is done, and Perry's verdict is swift. All alike. Every man jack of those tested has the jack. Captain Cook is appalled that it has spread so quickly. The first reports had occurred soon after arrival, and given there had been no such reports of anything like that happening to the crew of the Dolphin under Captain Wallace, or at least none that he had heard of, Cook can only draw one conclusion. To think that we had brought it along with us, Captain Cook writes, gave me no small uneasiness. He has done all in his power to prevent the disease progressing further, insisting that his men abstain from further congress. Alas, it is a losing battle. His powers too feeble a match for the allure of buxom, expert women, which he readily acknowledges. The women were so very liberal with their favours, or else nails, shirts, etc. were temptations that they could not withstand. Yet Cook is so relieved to find that the plague afflicting his men and the islanders is not of his doing. The natives speak of a visit perhaps a year earlier, 2 ships that docked in a harbour to the east, which fits with the odd European tools they have come across that are not of British construction. The disease predates our arrival, does it? Well, who else could be responsible but those earlier European arrivals? Happily, Cook records, I have the satisfaction to find that the natives all agree that we did not bring it here. Some of the Endeavour's officers have their suspicions as to which nation these sexually filthy ships came from. After all, syphilis is not called by the English sailors the French disease for nothing. Merde. For his part, however, Mr. Banks suspects another nation, recording on 8th of June, fresh proofs of the Spanish ships every day in things of theirs which have been left here. Among the rest, a coarse shirt and a woolen jacket, both of manufacture different from any English. 19th of June, 1769, Martavay Bay, a mad monkhouse. Surgeon Monkhouse has finally got there. He finally has a woman to call his own. And not just any woman. She is a handmaiden to the once Queen Oberea, no less. How do you like that, Mr. Banks? Isn't she beautiful? Mr. Banks agrees. So much so, in fact, that later that night, Surgeon Monkhouse, looking for his love, hears a familiar giggle and realizes, with that shattering shudder reserved for those who are humiliated, frustrated, and angered all in the one overpowering jealous jolt, that she is in Banks's tent. Banks! In an instant, Monkhouse is bursting into the tent of the rakish botanist, accusations at him and lamentations at her flying free. "You should not sleep in here," he roars to the Tahitian woman, before trying to drag her out. The night is filled with curses, screams, confusion, and anger. The surgeon's intrusion into the tent kills the mood entirely, and soon all but one of my fair ladies in Mr. Banks's tent rush out. The remaining woman is too alarmed, too frightened of this crude Mr. Monkhouse to move at all. She wails as Banks sees to her, calming and reassuring the woman that everything will be all right. Banks leads her out, only to be greeted by a confused gaggle of Tahitian women and a very, very upset Surgeon Monkhouse. Mr. Monkhouse and Mr. Banks, Parkinson will recount, had very high words, and I expected they would have decided it by a duel, which, however, they prudently avoided. Oberea and a retinue had gone to their canoe, and would not return, but Mr. Banks went and stayed with them all night. Surgeon Monkhouse is alone again. He reaches into his breast pocket for his snuff-box, his only worldly comfort, it seems. 26th of June 1769. Tahiti, Sacred Sojourn.
This ends CD 8. CD 9.
The men of the Endeavour prepare for departure, drying gunpowder on the deck while the sun is out, filling the water casks, rowing provisions to the ship, hauling everything onto the deck and stowing it in the hold. There's no shortage of work to be done, an endless litany of tasks that must be seen to before the ship is heading off into the great blue. Meanwhile, accompanied by Mr. Banks, Captain Cook sets out in the pinnace at first light to fulfil his remaining instructions concerning Tahiti, to fully circumnavigate this, the principal island in the archipelago, and chart it, particularly noting where its best harbours lie. Their days at sea pass idly, the weather clear, the temperature agreeable, and the ship content. Yet neither Cook nor Banks takes rest from their tasks, the captain observing, sketching, and recording the coastline, the botanist keeping his eyes on fish, seabirds, and distant plants. As they reach the southernmost part of the island, Banks is amused to spy a rather familiar bird, one he has not seen since he was last at home. A good old British goose. None of the men have seen fowl at Matavai Bay, but they know Captain Wallis had left behind some of the distinctly British birds. It seems as though one of Tahiti's chiefs now keeps them as pets. The wonders of the British Empire. Unfortunately, the novelty of the geese soon becomes a reminder of just how hungry they are. They had been hoping to find breadfruit along the journey, as it had been curiously absent from Matavai, a fact that seems to ring true elsewhere on the island. Where was that wonder food that had filled their bellies so many times before? "We found the season for that fruit wholly over," Cook records, "and not one to be seen on the trees, and all other fruit and roots were scarce." It is the season of scarcity, another good reason to set sail. The next few days entail an arduous journey, tracking the western shoreline northwards to the home of their friend Oberea. On the final evening of their sojourn, they land in Oberea's district of Papara, in the northwest of the island. The two propose to sleep the night at this place. However, they find Oberea absent, having gone to visit them at Matavai Bay. They settle matters with her father before proceeding to where they are told they may find a grand marae, the Tahitian version of a church or temple, as the Englishmen tend to think of it, a built place of worship like a flattened wide pyramid without a peak, covered with ornate carvings, and upon and around which the Tahitians make sacrifices to their gods. Captain and botanist are chatting idly, being careful of their step, when they suddenly stop dead in their tracks. For here before them is the most monumental marae they have ever seen. Certainly they have seen several maraes before around Matavai Bay, but they are little more than piles of rubble, even if they are important, revered piles of rubble. But not this marae. This is the great marae of Mahayatea. "It appeared to have been built many years, and was in a state of decay," Cook notes. "From this it would seem that this island hath been in a more flourishing state than it is at present, or that religious customs are, like most other nations, by these people less observed." Banks is stunned by the workmanship, and has no doubt this is certainly the masterpiece of Indian architecture in this island. Its size and workmanship almost exceed belief. Cook takes it in, silently impressed, his surveyor's mind ticking rapidly to record the size of this man-made wonder. It is a long square of stonework built pyramidically. Its base is 267 feet by 87 feet. At the top, it is 250 feet by 8 feet. It is not just the structure's size, but also its beauty, the decorous adornments. Still, what most captures the wonder of Mr. Banks is its proportions. "It is almost beyond belief," he writes admiringly in his journal, "that Indians could raise so large a structure without the assistance of iron tools to shape their stones or mortar to join them, which last appears almost essential as the most of them are round. It is done, though, and almost as firmly as a European workman would have done it. The labour of the work is prodigious." The captain and the great natural historian circle the perimeter of the building, finding to the west another court or paved area in which were several ephatas, a kind of altar raised on wooden pillars about 7 feet high. One wonders what those altars were used for specifically. Cook and Banks suddenly stiffen as they notice bones, many bones, on the edges of these suddenly macabre ruins. For yes, as they soon come to learn, these pillars had been used for a ghoulish purpose, where they offer meat of all kinds to the gods. We have seen large hogs offered, and here were the skulls of above 50 of them, beside those of dogs. Oh, but their discomfort does not abate, for while making their silent way back to the boat, the two Englishmen cannot help but notice bones they had previously given no attention, bones that look strangely familiar. Good God, these are human bones, especially ribs and vertebra, scattered around like the leftovers of a great feast. What is this place to which chance had brought them? Where has this extraordinary altar of worship come from? Myriad questions jostling in their minds, Cook and Banks proceed homewards to Matavai Bay, looking for the one man who should be able to provide answers. Tupaia does not mince his words in response. Yes, animals are sacrificed here, great hogs and large birds. And yes, we also sacrifice people. Doing his best to make the white men understand, Tupaia describes a terrible war that took place only a year ago. Prior to the bloodshed, this grand marae belonged to Queen Oberea and another chief named Oamo. But it was not to last, as Banks records the essence of Tupaia's message. The greatest pride of an inhabitant of Tahiti is to have a grand marae. In this particular, our friends far exceed any one in the island, and in the Dolphins' time, the first of them exceeded everyone else in riches and respect as much. As is so often the case, peace reigned until it was no longer convenient for one of the sides involved. That side was the Southern District, who concocted a terrible ambush, descending on Oberea's people and killing many of them, with their bones now the very powder beneath our feet. The Queen herself? She was forced to retreat to the safety of the mountains, an exile in her own lands. The conquerors burnt all the houses, which were very large, and took away all the hogs, etc. Cook and Banks can only conclude the jawbones, which we saw hung up in Oamo's house, had been carried away as trophies, and are used by the Indians here in exactly the same manner as the North Americans do scalps. 5th of July, 1769, Matavai Bay. Stick, poke, scream, bleed, repeat. On this day, Joseph Banks, ever the astute observer with the scientific bent, finally gets to watch that most curious practice, a permanent marking of the body, undertaken by all on Tahiti. It is called a tattoo. The white men have seen several different tattoos since arriving on the island, from ill-designed figures of men, birds, or dogs, to circles, crescents, etc., which they have on their arms and legs, to the figure Z that the women have simply on every joint of their fingers and toes. In fact, many of the Jacks now sport their own tattoos. For all the variation, all of the Tahitians agree in having their buttocks covered with a deep black. Over this, most have arches drawn one over another as high as their short ribs, which are near 1/4 inch broad. These arches seem to be their great pride, as both men and women show them with great pleasure. and so it is performed today by a man upon the buttocks of a 12-year-old girl, who is held down by two women upon a mat, as with furrowed brow he breaks her skin with a very thin, flat piece of bone. The bone is a little shorter than an index finger and an inch broad, with a handle at one end, and 30 razor-sharp pointed teeth stuck into the other end. And now watch as this highly skilled artisan, this tattooist, dips the razor-sharp teeth into a lamp-black substance, prepared from the smoke of a kind of oily nut used by them instead of candles, and places it on the girl's buttock before delivering a series of short, sharp blows from a stick to the handle of the instrument, which drives the black substance below the surface of the sweating girl's skin, every blow from the stick drawing a fresh stream of lightly spurting blood. The effete Englishman winces with every blow. The patient bore this for about a quarter of an hour with most stoical resolution, Joseph Banks chronicles. By that time, however, the pain began to operate too strongly to be peaceably endured. She began to complain, and soon burst out into loud lamentations, and would fain have persuaded the operator to cease. She was, however, held down by two women who sometimes scolded, sometimes beat, and at other times coaxed her. The process goes on for an hour, by end of which that particular buttock indeed has an impressive swirling Tahitian design upon it to match her other buttock, which had obviously undergone the same process some time before. And yet there remains work to do. The arches upon the loins upon which they value themselves much were not yet done, the doing of which, they told, caused more pain than what I had seen. The men of the Endeavour continue to labour mightily to prepare their ship, even as Fort Venus is slowly dismantled, with all that is not local brought back on board. But as the date of their departure draws near, some of the men grow reluctant to leave. After all, do they really want to leave this paradise? What can the rest of the world offer that Tahiti cannot? Marines Webb and Gibson certainly don't remember any Tahitian women with beautiful bodies back on the streets of England. Frankly, they don't remember much of anything before Tahiti. This heaven is simply too good to bid farewell to. Thinking on it some, the two make their decision, and on the night of the 9th of July, which they know is the eve of the captain ordering everyone back to the ship, the privates dash to the hills with their new wives. Having received an offer from one chief regarding both land and servants, Webb and Gibson have decided to embrace the Tahitian way the way they embrace their women, with everything they have in them, and are now brothers in everything. A beautiful and free life in a boundless paradise awaits them. To Cook, such desertions cannot be tolerated. Diplomacy be damned, desertion cannot be tolerated. Cook orders a dozen chiefs, including King Tutaha, to be held as hostages. With the transit now recorded, holding Tutaha no longer puts their whole operation at risk, as it had been when Lieutenant Gore had done it. The dramatic gesture succeeds as all Tahiti races to return the miscreants, and the two Marines return to the Endeavour, where their dashes are met with lashes, chained to a post and given a truly terrible 24 strokes each, until their backs are little more than a mess of red ribbons. There is no shortage of sheepish faces among the witnesses, Jack Tars, who may have been thinking of their own mad run for the mountains as well. They aren't any more. 12th of July, 1769, Tahiti. Take Tupaia from Utopia. Tupaia is no longer as popular as he once was among the chiefs. Assisting that dastardly chief-napping Captain Toot has given many of the Tahitian elders reason to detest him, none more so than the humiliated King Tutaha. If Tupaia knows anything, it's which way the wind is blowing, and he is now as eager to leave as Webb and Gibson were to stay. Say, Mr. Banks, why not take me with you? In fact, Tupaia doesn't ask so much, as he states in a quiet but solid voice that he is resolved to go with you to England. Curious about the world beyond him, Tupaia wishes to learn the white man's language and understand the source of their power. Ideally, to learn how to harness it himself, to return to his own island and rid it of his enemies. Not only that, he has been promised by the Endeavour's men that Brittany is only 10 moons' sail from here. That is not too many moons, and should allow him to arrive back to his homeland with the knowledge he needs, and fit enough and young enough to claim back his island. Mr. Banks? Banks, ever a fan of an odd plan, thinks it is a wonderful idea. "He is certainly a most proper man," Banks records, "well-born, chief Tahoa, or priest of this island, consequently skilled in the mysteries of their religion, but what makes him more than anything else desirable is his experience in the navigation of these people and knowledge of the islands in these seas. He has told us the names of above 70, the most of which he has himself been at. For while it is one thing for them to have the know-how, means, and instrumentation to add to their knowledge of this world, it is quite another to have an extremely learned man who is happy to share what he knows, effectively sharing with them the knowledge that the Tahitian people have built up over centuries. It is this last point he will belabour to convince the captain. "I will go ashore and return in the evening," Tupaia tells Banks, with seemingly no trace of doubt in his mind. "I will make a signal for a boat to be sent off for me." Banks agrees, somewhat amused at Tupaia's confidence. Banks approaches Captain Cook. Why not take Tupaia back to England with them? For Cook, the answer is easy: no. For one thing, he is sure that the Lords would take a very dim view of having to support the Tahitian priest once they arrive back in England. "The government will never in all probability take any notice of him," Cook tries to make his zealous gentleman friend understand. "And then, what do you propose, Mr. Banks?" But Captain, their captain, Tupaia knows these waters for hundreds of miles around, and he can tell us the names of new lands, show us their safe harbours, help us commune with the natives. Captain Cook's brow furrows in thought. He is more interested, but still, fearing for Tupaia's ultimate fate, says in the manner of a concerned father, "No, Mr. Banks." "Very well then, if the captain does not wish to take him on his own account, Mr. Banks is happy to charge to another account, and so plays the card that has worked best throughout his life, his wealth. Will Captain Cook agree to take Tupaia if I, Joseph Banks of New Burlington Street, Mayfair, personally pay all of the Tahitian's future expenses and undertake to take care of him? Beyond the joy of showing Tupaia off in London, he will be the hit of the season. It will be of genuine scientific interest to see how the Tahitian will react and interact with English life and European ways." Banks records in his journal, "Thank heaven I have a sufficiency, and I do not know why I may not keep him as a curiosity, as well as some of my neighbours do lions and tigers, at a larger expense than he will probably ever put me to." The reluctant Cook agrees, and also allows Tupaia to bring his servant boy Teato, a lad of some 12 years old, for it is unthinkable that a man of Tupaia's caste be obliged to wash his own clothes, prepare his own meals, and bathe without an attendant. 13th of July, 1769. Tupaia torn, Tahiti mourned. At last the day has come. After 3 glorious months in this emerald Eden in the azure sea, it is time to bid farewell. As regretful as the moment is to most of the sailors who have lived a life they could never have dreamt of over these last 12 weeks, filled with food, drink, sunshine, and voluptuous women of sweet disposition, it seems equally to be a matter of deep regret to the Tahitians that the men of the Endeavour are leaving them. Oberea is brought out on a canoe to farewell them, and she is surrounded by at least another 100 canoes, filled with waving, weeping Tahitians, many women among them. Just before noon, Captain Cook gives the orders. "Weigh the anchor." Some sailors man the capstan to haul up the anchor, while others scramble across the spars as swathes of heavy canvas unfurl and snap to attention, filling with the light easterly breeze, perfect for the occasion. The Endeavour starts to move. The sailors not on watch crowd the gunwales, waving to their swaying lovers and friends. "On our leaving the shore," Sydney Parkinson chronicles, "the people in the canoes set up their woeful cry, 'Away, away,' and the young women wept very much. Some of the canoes came up to the side of the ship while she was under sail, and brought us many cocoas." Cook reflects on their time on Tahiti as the ship gathers speed. "Some few differences have now and then happened, owing partly to the want of rightly understanding each other, and partly to their natural thievish disposition, which we could not at all times bear with or guard against. But these have been attended with no ill consequence to either side, except the first, in which one of them was killed, and this I was very sorry for, because from what had happened to them by the Dolphin I thought it would have been no hard matter to have got and keep a footing with them, without bloodshed. 2 men on the Endeavour can see better than anyone, Joseph Banks and Tupaia, who have climbed into the crow's nest, the lookout point on the highest spar of the topmast. For Banks, this island has delivered the most extraordinary time of his life. For Tupaia, this had become his home, farewelled perhaps forevermore. As Banks waves his hand in his delicate, limited, excruciatingly English manner, he watches the Tahitians on shore, and in the canoes, swaying in a rhythmic farewell that beckons as much as it says goodbye. What sort of fools are they to leave this paradise? Banks is also deeply moved to notice Tupaia trying to hide his tears. Of course, it must be a deeply wrenching thing for the man to leave behind all he holds so dear, to wonder when next he will return. But Banks has little doubt of just how useful he will be to them. A solitary night, in his bed, lying pristine in the moonlight for the first time in many months, beckons. Before dousing the lantern, Banks writes in his journal, "We again launched out into the ocean in search of what chance and Tupaia might direct us to." 16th of July, 1769. North of Tahiti. Tupaia oars and draws. Only seconds after they weigh anchor in the small harbour of this island, Huaheine, the natives, all dressed, tattooed, and speaking in the manner of Tahitians, come out to the ship in canoes. They remain shy of coming aboard, however, until they see Tupaia, after which they all come aboard, the king and all. Captain Cook, accompanied by Mr. Banks, Dr. Solander, and Surgeon Monkhouse, head to shore with Tupaia and this king, upon which they are treated to a grand ceremony led by Tupaia. The priest wastes no time in disrobing to the waist. He then sat down before a great number of the natives that were collected together in a large shed, records James Cook, the rest of us, by his own desire, standing behind. Tupaia moves through the crowd like a messiah of sorts, handing beads, handkerchiefs, bunches of feathers, and even a black silk neckcloth to the parishioners before him. That seen to, Tupaia heads off to the nearby marae to pay his oblations, as Cook records. Upon leaving, Captain Cook presents the leading chief with a small plate inscribed with the words, "His Britannic Majesty's ship Endeavour, Lieutenant Cook, Commander, 16th of July, 1769, Huaheine." And with that, the Endeavour men, along with Tupaia, take their leave, weighing anchor and sailing southwest, on their way to Tupaia's original home island, Raiatea, the place from which he was exiled. The first thing done was the performing of Tupaia's ceremony, in all respects as at Huaheine, I then hoisted an English jack and took possession of the island, and those adjacent, in the name of His Britannic Majesty, calling them by the same name as the natives do, Cook records. As they arrive at the next island, the ritual is repeated, and at each successive island Tupaia performs his ceremony and Cook claims possession in the king's name. Simple as that. However, Tupaia finds himself just as busy when on board the Endeavour, answering a relentless onslaught of questions from Captain Cook. What shape is the island? How far is it from the last one? What type of bay does it have? Indeed, the more the two men talk with one another, Tupaia has his own litany of questions, the more the English mariner comes to appreciate the sophistication of this native priest and the level of his knowledge. No, the island folk do not have the huge vessels of the Europeans, nor the instrumentation, nor the books, but they have their own school of thought, their own systems developed and honed over generations. Cook records that in their longer voyages, the South Sea Islanders steer by the sun in the day and in the night by the stars, all of which they distinguish separately by names, and know in what part of the heavens they will appear in any of the months during which they are visible in their horizon. They also know the time of their annual appearing and disappearing with more precision than will easily be believed by a European astronomer. Cook is scarcely able to believe what the natives are capable of, their wonderful sagacity in foretelling the weather, at least the quarter from which the wind shall blow at a future time. Tupaia is proud to show off his methods of weather divining, but one strikes Cook as particularly genius. They say that the Milky Way is always curved laterally, but sometimes in one direction and sometimes in another, and that this curvature is the effect of it being already acted upon by the wind, so that if the same curvature continues a night, a corresponding wind certainly blows the next day. There can be no question of Tupaia's talent, his value to the ship. Of their rules, Cook writes, I shall not pretend to judge, but I know that by whatever means they can predict the weather, at least the wind, with much greater certainty than we can. Joseph Banks, however, is not as convinced of Tupaia's genius, for Tupaia is becoming a fast favourite among the crew of the Endeavour for his wind spell. Yes, he can bring the wind just by chanting for it, I swear. Look, now, as he raises his arms to the heavens above, turns his face skywards, and begins his chant, with a refrain meaning, O Tane, bring me a fair wind. O Tane, ara mai mate, ora mai mate, O Tane, ara mai mate, ora mai mate, O Tane, ara mai mate, ora mai mate. Sure enough, within mere minutes, the sails flap, then fill, and the Endeavour starts to surge. It is Tupaia magic, I tell you. Banks is far less impressed, as he notes in his journal that, when it comes to casting his spell, Tupaia never began until he saw a breeze so near the ship that it generally reached her before his prayer was finished. But Tupaia's popularity leads to pride, which quickly leads to a fall in his popularity. As sailor James Margrat would recount, Tupaia was a man of real genius, a priest of the first order, and an excellent artist. He was, however, by no means beloved by the Endeavour's crew, being looked upon as proud and austere, extorting homage, which the sailor who thought themselves degraded by bending to an Indian were very unwilling to pay. However the white men regard him, Tupaia must simply adapt the best he can to the rhythm of life aboard the Endeavour, the discipline, the eternal maintenance, the periodic furl and unfurl of sails. He spends his time with the captain, trying to understand the ways of the white men, particularly the way they keep a calendar and measure months the way he measures moons, always with an eye to the promise that they will get to England within 10 moons. Moving like an exotic fish through a coral reef, darting from one spot to another, Tupaia pops up all over the ship, a silent observer. He is fascinated by the riggings, the ropes, the routine with which the sailors move about, how they can manoeuvre so great a vessel through so capricious a sea, how they sound the depths and measure the speed, how they record shapes and sizes of islands, their distance and direction from each other, and how important such charts are to them. Would Captain Cook like his help in making his chart of Tahiti and its surrounds, detailing all of the holy man's own knowledge of the islands in these parts? Yes, Captain Cook would. The chance to create such a map, giving the visitors the benefit of these centuries of accrued knowledge in just a short time, is an extraordinary one. Excited, James Cook quickly turns the great cabin into a supremely scientific space. At one end of the table sits Mr. Banks, the doctor, and Sidney Parkinson, all three learned men discussing and dissecting flora and fauna. Which genus is this? What species is that? And what precisely shall we call it? At the other end, Captain Cook and Tupaia stand over maps and charts, tracing coastlines with their fingers and sketching islands with pencils. Scattered throughout the room and captivated by both ends of the table, the Endeavour's senior officers and midshipmen are in awe, knowing that this is a time to listen rather than speak. Very occasionally, when Captain Cook is so engrossed in the task at hand that he will barely notice, his heavy brow deeply furrowed in concentration, Tupaia leaves Captain Cook's side and flits to Banks's end of the table, eager to paint and draw under the watchful eye of Sidney Parkinson, who has begun to teach him. For the most part, though, Tupaia stands right there, as Cook, with an expert's practised hand, places the charting paper upon the table, and as Tupaia uses his finger to trace the shape of Tahiti, the island at the centre of his own world, Cook's pencil carefully traces behind. Sometimes Tupaia will stop him, as the shape that is emerging has an error and does not conform to the shape the priest has in his head, at which point Captain Cook rubs it out and redraws it. Bit by bit, however, the coastline contours of Tahiti emerge, at which point Tupaia moves on to the next island he is eager to visit, Raiatea. Its place is marked, its path is traced, and another piece of Tupaia's archipelago emerges before Cook's eyes have even seen it. As the Endeavour hops from South Sea Island to South Sea Island, the charts form, and after each island is drawn, Tupaia tells Cook whether it was either larger or smaller than Tahiti, and likewise whether it was high or low, whether it was peopled or not, adding now and then some curious accounts relative to some of them. Yes, Tupaia even recounts the characteristics of the tribes that live on the islands, and knows the names of the many chiefs. And of course Cook also marks down the name of each island, trying to record with European phonetics the local nomenclature. Tupaia does not measure distance by degree of latitude or longitude, of course, nor by nautical miles or leagues, but simply how many days' sail one is from another, and in which broad direction, which helps Cook determine a rough positioning of each island. And so it goes, through a combination of Cook's European knowledge, surveying and chart-making, and Tupaia's ancestral knowledge, passed down from father to son, for nigh on a millennium, a singularly valuable chart is made, recording the outlines, positions and names of no fewer than 70 islands. Tupaia himself displays such a singularly impressive amount of knowledge that Cook himself is stunned. Years later, one who talked to Cook of it on a later voyage, Johann Forster, would recount that Tupaia must have been the most intelligent man that ever was met with by any European navigator in these isles. Which is a good thing for the task ahead. Now, early August, the Endeavour is about to turn south, soon to sail into unexplored waters, the endless unknown of the great blue before them. Alexander Dalrymple is convinced that somewhere in that direction lies the great southern land. Cook does not believe it, but suddenly it occurs to him that he is with someone who might know. "Say, Tupaia, Is there perhaps a very large land mass, a very big island somewhere to our south? Tupaia considers it for no longer than a heartbeat. Of course not. If there was, we would know about it. There is nothing of significance to the south. Very well then. Captain Cook is, frankly, not surprised. But he has his orders and follows them, ordering the Endeavour south on the 9th of August. Late August, 1769, somewhere in the South Seas, Comet and Kamate cometh. One night at the end of August, there's a faint streak of light in the night sky, which Mr. Green quickly identifies as Comet Nebulus, though Tupaia's understanding differs wildly. Standing on the swaying deck, as still as a statue in the moonlight, Tupaia recognizes the faint streak for what it obviously is, a sign from the gods. He is aghast, capable only of whispering to his servant boy Tayato, whose eyes widen in horror as he gazes towards the heavens. The comet brings ill portents. The Bola Bola people will soon kill the people of Raiatea, so it is known. Despite this news, Tayato steels himself. They are far from Raiatea, and Tupaia has not failed him. Yet, Tupaia and Tayato contemplate their fates in silence, though are each comforted by the presence of the other, two beings from the sweet tropical islands, so very, very far from home, and getting farther away all the time. The Endeavour sails on. The winds blow ever colder. There is no sign of any great southern land, just endless horizons of hazy oceans. Putting down all his navigational equipment after once more shooting the sun, Captain Cook does his calculations and records that on this day, of the 2nd of September, the Endeavour has indeed reached the latitude of 40 degrees south. Here, the weather deteriorates considerably, and Captain Cook decides to alter course to the northward, noting in his journal, "But as the weather was so very tempestuous, I laid aside this design, and thought it more advisable to stand to the northward, into better weather, lest we should receive such damage to our sails and rigging as might hinder further prosecution of the voyage." As their journey continued, Cook observed an interesting phenomenon. Note, while we were between the latitude of 37 and 40 degrees, we had constantly blowing tempestuous weather. But since we have been to the northward of 37 degrees, the weather hath been very moderate. And Banks later wrote, "The captain told me that he has, during this whole voyage, observed that between the degrees of 40 and 37 south latitude, the weather becomes suddenly milder in a very great degree, not only in the temperature of the air, but in the strength and frequency of the gales of wind, which increase very much in going towards 40, and decrease in the same proportion as you approach 37. This weather pattern was later dubbed the Roaring Forties. With still no continent in sight, they now head to the place named by the Dutch, in the mid-1600s, Nova Zealandia, after Holland's province of Zeeland, and referred to by the English as New Zealand. It was first discovered by Europeans back in 1642 when the Dutch maritime explorer Abel Tasman, sent by the Dutch East India Company to find what lay east of the Dutch East Indies, centred on their Javanese capital of Batavia, and where the native peoples might have anything worth stealing, had turned northeast from Van Diemen's Land and discovered what he thought to be a large land mass at latitude 42 degrees 17 minutes and longitude 171 degrees 14 minutes. Never one to sail blind, Cook has read everything written about Abel Tasman's landing on this large piece of land in the South Pacific. It had not gone well. Approaching the shore, the Dutchman had been met with threatening warriors in canoes, who only retreated when Tasman fired a cannon. Alas, the warriors returned, chanted, and dragged 4 Dutch sailors overboard before clubbing them to death. Not for nothing would Tasman name his sole brief contact point in New Zealand Moordenas Bay, Murderer's Bay, and the closest his men had come to landing were the 4 bodies on the seabed, just offshore. After meeting the fearsome locals, Tasman did not linger longer to explore the land's contours, and so the Royal Society now wishes to know, was it perhaps the start of the Great Southern Land's coast? They will, of course, find out in due course. Southwest at 6 knots, steady as she goes, if you please, Mr. Molyneux, and in the interim engage in the usual shipboard activities. One of these is musket and cannon drills, which take place under a cloudy sky as the gun crews again fire their great guns into the vastness of the ocean. When it comes to the small arms, the Marines, petty officers and seamen are put through their paces as ever, though this time with a particularly interested observer. It is Tupaia, eager to learn everything he can about this strange power the white men possess, against the day he will need such power to retake his home island of Raiatea from the heathens. Before long he too is bringing a musket to his shoulder, squeezing the trigger and having the satisfaction of seeing a splash just a few yards in front of the white top he had been aiming at. It is but an occasional occurrence that those who make their mark on the map are of low rank and common birth, and yet, on the 24th of September, something is drifting along the surface of the water. Not a fish, nor a bird. Green, brown, long tendrils and spooling loops of it, seaweed. A sure sign of land somewhere, if not necessarily in the direction they were going. A gallon of rum to the man who first spies land. The land you find will bear your name from here on in. Captain Cook knows how to encourage his crew, and the promise of rum is too terrific for the crew to ignore. At only 12 years old, Nicholas Young certainly doesn't expect to be that man, though like any boy he holds a faint hope that it will be him, that he can prove his worth despite his youth. A week goes by, and nothing has been seen. No land, anyway. Just more seaweed. More seaweed. More driftwood? Land birds? We must be getting closer. Finally, on the 6th of October, the conditions are ripe for a man to make out the faintest glimmer of land. Only, it is not a man who spots New Zealand. It is a boy with the sharpest eyes on the Endeavour, the young Nicholas Young. Land! Land! It is there, I tell you, about 9 leagues off our starboard bow. From directly below, Joseph Banks gazes that way, but, denied the lad's sharp eyes and height above deck, can see nothing. No matter. Within a few minutes, Banks will recount, the cry circulated, and up came all hands. Still none of them down low can see anything, and, for a better view, one by one, led by Captain Cook and Mr. Banks, they clamber up the mast, each anxious that their eyes can spy what might be, no, what Joseph Banks particularly is convinced must be the Great Southern Land. Captain Cook, of course, does not believe it, but is fairly sure that it will be part of New Zealand. Abel Tasman had charted some of its west coast. This will be simply the east coast of New Zealand, he is sure. The first step, of course, is to name what has just been sighted by European eyes for the first time. For perpetuity, let it be known on atlases of the world as Young Nick's Head, in honour of the boy who first saw it. The lad beams red with pleasure, a little like a summer sunrise. A bonus is the gallon of rum he has given for his reward, to be consumed entirely by his 12-year-old self. For his part, Joseph Banks bubbles with enthusiasm as he dashes down his first impressions in his journal, his mere hopes crystallizing into solid facts with every slashing stroke of his pen. Land still distant 7 or 8 leagues appears larger than ever. In many parts 3, 4, and 5 ranges of hills are seen, one over the other, and a chain of mountains over all, some of which appear enormously high. Much difference of opinion and many conjectures about islands, rivers, inlets, etc., but all hands seem to agree that this is certainly the continent we are in search of. Well, at least all hands that shake Banks's hand. In the captain's mind, whether or not this is indeed the great southern land will emerge in due course. What is most important for the moment is what he sees through his telescope in a large bay a couple of days later as they move along the coast. This land is inhabited. We saw in the bay several canoes, people upon the shore, and some houses in the country. Ideally, the natives will be friendly. For now, Cook orders his men to bring the ship into the bay while he begins the first accurate map of a land that until now has been a few uncertain lines and a smattering of rough coordinates. Chapter 8. Revealing New Zealand. They eat their enemies slain in battle. This seems to come from custom and not from a savage disposition. This they cannot be charged with. Captain Cook, 1770. Our friends here do not seem to feel the want of such places, as we have not yet seen the least appearance of cultivation. I suppose they live entirely upon fish, dogs, and enemies. Joseph Banks, on a tribe of Maori natives, specific to Queen Charlotte Sound, 1770. Their faces are the most remarkable. On them, they, by some sort of art unknown to me, dig furrows in their faces, a line deep at least, and as broad, the edges of which are often, again, indented, and most perfectly black. Always different spirals. All these finished with a masterly taste and execution, for of 100, which at first sight you would judge to be exactly the same, on a close examination no two will prove alike. Nor do I remember to have seen any two alike, for their wild imaginations scorn to copy as appears in almost all their works. Joseph Banks, on the New Zealand Natives, 1770. 8th of October, 1769. North shore of Turanganui-a-Kiwa. First contact for all. Final contact for one. And stroke. And stroke. And stroke. On this perfect afternoon, a soft breeze caresses the English sailors, helping to cool them from their exertions as they draw closer to this strange shore. Armed and primed in the pinnace, their nerves tingling with alertness, the Marines feel they are ready for whatever this land may throw at them, once they set foot on the beach. In the yawl, right behind them, Captain Cook, Joseph Banks, and his gentlemen are being rowed by 4 young Jacks. With his eye for coastal detail, the captain notes that the land rises high up from the shore, in chalky white cliffs, not unlike those in Dover. Yet, as high as those cliffs reach, the middle is lowland with hills gradually rising behind one another to the chain of high mountains inland. With nerves tingling evermore, they now see many individual plumes of smoke, some by the bay's edge, others far inland, but so very many and so widespread that the men agree with something less than ardour. This is surely a most populous country. Not long after the bows of the boats nudge onto the fine sandy shore on the east side of a small river mouth, Cook spies some natives on the opposite bank. Muscular brown torsos with black markings, jet-black hair in a knot atop their heads, and, eager to talk with them, decides to take a chance. "Carry us over," he orders the 4 sailors in the yawl, before turning to the posse in the pinnace. "Lay at the entrance," he orders them, in case they need a rapid escape. Alas, as soon as the natives see the yawl crossing the river, they fade back into the bush. Undaunted, Cook has the yawl come into the shallows and stay there, held by 2 of his men knee-deep in water, as he, Banks, and the doctor clamber ashore, with weaponry in hand, and walk apprehensively up the beach to the edge of the bush, hoping to see natives. Peering through the trees and scrub, The captain can make out homes and huts, the dwellings of the natives, but nary a soul to greet them. From the pinnace, lying at the river entrance, the Marines are watching closely, first noting the yawl landing on the west bank, then the captain and his two companions walking towards the huts back in the trees. Good God! Look! 4 natives have emerged from the bushes on the eastern side of the river, further upstream, and are stalking towards the unwitting sailors, waiting with the yawl, as their own attention lingers on the captain and the gentleman heading in the other direction. "Drop downstream!" one of the Marines shouts to the 4 oblivious lads who turn their heads wondering what the trouble might be. The Marines are motioning wildly, frantically trying to make them see... what? 4 stalking natives, each one now knee-deep in the river, each one with a long spear. The boys pile into the yawl and push off downstream. Stroke, stroke, stroke! But the agile natives bound through the shallows in swift pursuit. The Marines shout and scream. Some begin to run upstream, along the river, along the bank, but the natives continue to advance on the yawl, spears foremost in the sunlight. Even from this distance they look as serious as a hole in the hull. In an instant, the morning stillness is shattered by the blast from the musket of the coxswain in the pinnace, enough to bring Captain Cook, Banks, and the doctor running back towards the river. Curiously, at the sound of the shot, the natives merely turn their heads towards the Marines at the river mouth, then keep on charging nimbly forward. Another blast shatters the air. This time the natives take no notice of the musket's report and keep moving forward. Why should they? They've never heard such a noise. It holds no fear for them. And what now? In the startled skip of a heartbeat they raise their long spears, pointy ends towards the white men, and charge the yawl. Before, with the crack of a single shot, the lead native goes down in a bloody splash. Time hangs, suspended. The 4 sailors are the first to understand what has happened. The Marine's musket ball has flown straight and true through the heart of the enormous man who'd been about to thrust the first spear. He is Temaro, the great-grandson of Chief Rakeatane, fearless chief-to-be of the Teatanga Ahawati people. He falls with his spear still in hand, his arm still crooked above his head, his body bobbing up and down, as crimson first blurts, then spurts, weeps, then seeps from his chest into the crystal water. He is dead within 30 seconds, his spear falling from his lifeless hand and settling on the bed of the river shallows. The other 3 natives, stunned by the devastation wrought by a single clap of thunder, stand stock still. Their faces betray their shock, their horror, that so great and noble a chief could fall so quickly, so unceremoniously. They had been about to attack these pasty white figures from another world when thunder had come from the river mouth, where the other white figures stand, and then the mighty chief had fallen down dead at their feet. His body is swaying slightly with the flowing water. A vibrant red feather comes loose from his thick dark hair and begins its own journey downstream as the stiff native cloth of his garments flutters gracefully in the current. Having departed to join their sacred ancestors, he takes with him an ancient understanding of the land, the sea, the gods, now lost for all time in the space of a final gushed heartbeat. At least, to these warriors, the greatest honour is to die in battle, and he has done exactly that, at the head of his warriors, defending his land. The sailors in the yawl stare down at the fallen man, too. His face holds no expression beyond the vague, unfocused mask of the recently dead. But the carvings and tattoos that mark his face? Not even death can take those. Deep canals marked with what looks like black ink run up and down his face, regular whorls and spirals, each one unique and telling a story and signifying the stature, achievements, and tribe of the man who lay beneath them. For no less than 2 minutes, an eternity, neither the natives nor the boy sailors move, each group petrified. The Marines are motionless, too, like figures in a tableau. Are we about to be slaughtered by spears? The sailors wonder. One move and it might be our hearts pierced through, our lifeless bodies swaying in the river's flow. Who will be the next to fall by thunder? The natives wonder. Who will be the next to die by magic? Don't move. But one man is moving and shouting. It is Captain Cook, musket in hand, running towards them, closely followed by Banks and the doctor. The natives are jolted out of their stunned state and quickly begin dragging the body of Temaro up the riverbank, a smear of blood in his wake. But he is too heavy. They only get him a few yards before they give up the uneven struggle, letting their chief's crumpled bodies slump into the muddy ground before they flee into the bush. From the safety of the woods, the natives see the tall one, the leader, with the younger one beside him, look down on their slain chief. Cook and Banks examine the body curiously. He was a middle-sized man, tattooed in the face on one cheek, only in spiral lines very regularly formed. He was covered with a fine cloth of a manufacture totally new to us. His complexion brown, but not very dark. The body is left where it lies. Cook and his party row back to the Endeavour, in an uneasy silence. The night will be even more uneasy, as Banks records. Soon after we came on board, we heard the people ashore very distinctly talking very loud, no doubt, as they were not less than 2 miles distant from us, consulting probably what is to be done tomorrow. Those voices are a mix of mass misery and rage, a high keening, an unworldly sound that makes all those aboard the Endeavour feel as far from home as ever they have been in their lives, which is in fact the geographical truth. On the morrow both the Englishmen and the natives will be ready for each other, if not at all sure what the other will do. Captain Cook doubles the guard on deck this night, against the chance that the natives might make a nocturnal attack. At dawn, Captain Cook and Mr. Banks bring their spyglasses to bear and scan the shoreline near the river mouth. They spot the natives immediately, a group of some 50 men gathered on the western bank of the river. All are dressed the same, adorned in what must be the native equivalent of a uniform. A piece of cloth hangs from each waist, and from each head grows a thick mass of dark hair, knotted and woven with red feathers. But most striking are their faces. Each one is fiercer than the last, lavishly adorned with tattoos of spirals and swirls, a black web of menace. Peering closer, Cook wonders if these markings are the same as those he saw in Tahiti. Their lips are certainly tattooed in the Tahitian fashion, a simple blackening of the skin, but the markings on their cheeks are so much deeper, so much darker than those he has seen before. It is almost as though— no, surely not. But yes, these are not just tattoos, but also scars. 4 spears rise above the throng of warriors, the rest hold smaller club-like weapons. Mercifully, there appears to be no mass army formed as the Englishmen had feared. Captain Cook must go ashore. The ship's company is in desperate need of fresh water. Non-cooperative natives or no, terrifying tattoos or no, James Cook will not be deterred. Ordering the pinnace and yawl back into the water, Cook fills the boats with marines and the sturdiest, burliest and most menacing of his sailors. Tupaia is eager to come, too. The last few weeks, particularly, have been wretched for him, trapped in this realm of cramped spaces, sweaty sailors, stale food and a chill that does not abate, a freezing of their very souls like he and Taieto have never experienced, with their only recourse having been to dress in the absurdly cumbersome European garments that the sailors had lent them. So yes, Tupaia has had enough of the hulking wooden ship and is desperate for a break, for the chance to again feel solid earth beneath his feet, see trees, smell bush, gaze upon the birds, and watch animals. He will go too. And stroke, and stroke, and stroke, and— Now they surge forward, with a rush, as the breaking waves catch their boat and hurtle them towards the beach, where the natives await. It is as though the gods of this land are anxious to see what will happen when the 2 parties make contact, though whether the result will be blood on the white sands or an embrace of peace, nobody is sure. The waves pound on the eastern side of the river, crashing down with a frantic force, before receding and rallying, ready to do it all over again. It is a compelling vision, but pales in comparison to what takes place on the western bank. Some 50 men have gathered there, and now sit patiently, prepared for the arrival of these strangely pasty-faced visitors in their amazingly large vessel. Eager for peace, even at his own risk, Cook orders all the men, including the armed marines, to stay on board and take the vessels back out beyond the breakers, while he, Banks, Solander, and Tupaia are dropped to shore during a lull in the menacing shore break. "Keep an eye on us. I will give the signal to land if needed," the captain tells Sergeant Edgecombe. Very cautiously now, the 3 Englishmen and the Tahitian approach the edge of the river, unsure of how to proceed. Perhaps the natives will be familiar with the Tahitian tongue. Surely it must be closer than English. Tupaia calls out to them. All 50-odd natives rise up at once. Every man produced either a long pike or a small weapon of well-polished stone, about a foot long and thick enough to weigh 4 or 5 pounds, records Joseph Banks. Arms at the ready, some of the natives call back to Tupaia in their own tongue, their words unknown. "Itai nai!" Neither Tupaia nor the white men can make sense of the language. It is foreign to their ears, but the tone, the timbre of their tongues, that is far more recognizable. Leave, right now. There can be no misinterpreting this message, yet Cook is not one to turn his heel on the orders of a rabble of natives. Yes, he and his men will stay put, though their resolve is rattled somewhat when the natives take their next step. Suddenly they move into some kind of formation, with several rows of them standing behind one large native, who crouches as if he is about to pounce forth like a big cat. Behind him, the 50 warriors also crouch. Shining muscles ripple in the sunshine. Tattooed visages scowl at the white men with wide-eyed grimaces, and snaking poked-out tongues that would make a cannon quake, a newly launched ship slip back up the slipway. In the distance there is a cry of a bird. Around the white men, insects buzz. Waves crash on the beach. The rhythmic thudding may be distant drums, or their own hearts. They can't be sure. The lead native gives out an ear-piercing yell. The 50 warriors give out an ear-piercing yell in response. What follows is an extraordinary chanting dance, a dancing war song, as Lieutenant Gore describes it from his vantage point on the yawl. It is filled with synchronized moves of vibrating violence, and it is calculated, in my opinion, to cheer each other and intimidate their enemies. A mesmerizing rhythm of rage that seems to come not just from 50 yards away across a river, but from ages past. At first, the cadence is slow, and the shouts are no more than rolling thunder in the distance. But soon that thunder is overhead, and the pace is a race, the shouts are booms, and the moves ever more violent, until the full-blown storm breaks upon the white men. And though the Englishmen cannot understand the words, there is no doubt as to their broad thrust. "We are very disposed to kill you. We do not want you on this land. Go, and go now. Leave the field. Go." Their entire bodies now are a blur of movement. Their heads are thrown back as they roar their rage, still in perfect cadence, distorting their mouths, lolling up their tongues and turning up the whites of their eyes, even as the thrusting movements of their twisting hands and shaking fists demonstrate their desire to hurt. Their eyes widen, their pupils roll back, and they make grimaces of such grotesque contortions it is as if they are channeling spirits from the underworld where their ancients dwell. The natives intersperse their war dance with terrifying pauses, the silence almost more menacing than the staggering staccato of yells and movements, shouting when the leader shouts, stomping when he stomps, and slapping the thighs when he slaps. Cook, Banks, the doctor, and their companions out in the boats watch mesmerized. never having seen anything like it in their lives, a verbal and visual violence as they have never experienced. No missile is yet thrown, no blood yet shed, but the white men still feel as though a battle is just breaking upon them. Are these natives about to attack? Captain Cook wonders, and takes his musket from the sling around his shoulder, levels it, and almost without thinking runs his thumb over the flint to ensure that it had been napped to a sharp edge, the best to create a spark when the flint hits the flat metal of the frizzen. Satisfied, he pulls the cock back, even as the natives become ever more threatening. As it all builds to a climax, it is as if they have been possessed en masse by evil spirits as they finish in one last shattering howl before falling silent, their hands dropping back to their thighs in unison, their snaking tongues finally rolled back into their mouths, their pupils returning from rolled-back eyes. Well, if there's one thing these natives will have to respect, no, fear, it is the power of muskets. Cook raises his musket, levels it at this dance of war, and squeezes the trigger. A crack, and the shot is whistling through the air, flying closer, closer, only to fall deliberately short, striking the water with a spraying burst of foam. A warning shot. It is heeded. The natives take a cautious step back, then another, frightened yet resolute that they will not fully retreat. Very well then. Still eager for peace, Cook orders his own men to retreat from the river's edge back down towards the river mouth. They move slowly, calmly, facing the grimacing natives, even as Cook waves his hand, signalling for the Marines to land. Within minutes, the pinnace comes flying, propelled by a large wave that delivers it right onto the beach, unscathed. The Marines, with weaponry and ammunition loaded down, are soon piling out and forming up. Under Captain Cook's lightly uttered orders, Sergeant Edgecombe unfurls the Union Jack. Flying it high atop a flagpole they have brought for this very purpose, the Marines slowly march up the beach, conscious of the tentative peace they have with the natives. As a further gesture of peace, Cook leads the procession 200 yards ahead of the Marines and is soon back by the river's edge with Mr. Monkhouse, Mr. Green, and the gentlemen all. These elegant men are now backed by His Majesty's Marines, muskets ready and loaded, each man holding fast in his formation. Great Britain, in the form of all the King's men, has arrived. The natives remain in a looser war dance formation, eyes popping, heads rolling, weapons waving. Cook's warning shot may have rattled them, but not nearly enough to take the menace out of their presence. These are truly fierce warriors, and this pre-battle ritual is terrifying. For his part, James Cook has no desire to see more violence or death, as had happened the day before to the native chief, whose body he can still see lying up on the muddy riverbank where it was left. He is also cognizant of his instructions from the Admiralty, which he repeats often to his own men. To endeavour, by all proper means, to cultivate a friendship and alliance with the natives. In lieu of friendship, peace will suffice. That is all they need in order to fill their water casks, restock their wood supplies, and take their leave. Cook gives Tupire a nod. His moment has arrived. He takes a few steps forward, his feet in the river's muddy shallows, and hails the natives across the water. "Hello!" And now a cry comes back. "Come over, we are friends." Tupire understands it, and they had understood him. Extraordinary. Though separated by time and tide, not to mention 4,000 miles of ocean, these natives share a language, or at least enough words, with the Tahitians to be intelligible. It was, Cook will record, an agreeable surprise to us to find that they perfectly understood him. And now that they can understand each other, Tupire dares hope they might be able to come to an understanding. "We want provisions," Tupire calls again, "and water. We will give you iron in exchange." The call comes back. Yes, the white men may have food and water. Encouraged, Tupire goes on. "I desire you to lay down your arms." This request is less well received. Lay down our weapons? It would be easier to lay down our heads. We are warriors. These weapons are part of our birthright, practically part of our bodies. The hair on the back of Tupaya's neck rises, even as he stiffens. Be careful. This is not going the way we want it to go. Translating the tension he feels radiating off the natives, Tupaya warns his party to be ready for treachery at any moment. These men are not your friends. At least one part of the problem is that the iron and beads the white men are offering seem to have little purchase with these natives. They seemed to set little value upon either, Banks notes, but especially upon the iron, the use of which they were totally ignorant of. "Cow! No!" Tupaya pleads in vain. Again and again he makes the request, imploring them to put down their spears and clubs for their own safety, but they will not cede. To the contrary, they start to brandish their weapons once more. Anxious, Tupaya warns Cook and the others again and again, "Be upon your guard. They are not your friends. Be upon your guard." Cook nevertheless remains confident that they can collectively keep the peace, and now signals for the natives to swim across the river to them. The natives respond by signalling to Cook that he and his men should instead swim the river to meet them on their own side. At last, however, as Banks records, an Indian stripped himself and swam over without arms. Surely this is a sign of peace, thinks James Cook. And when the first native swimmer arrives on the opposite riverbank and is neither beaten nor killed, when the cracking thunder of yesterday is not heard, when he is given something by the white men, 2 more natives come across the river, and then some 30 of them. But the crowd all bring their arms with them. And so now both the Englishmen and the natives are standing face to face, both parties armed, 2 worlds set to collide. Captain Cook, Banks, and their party get their first close-up look at the New Zealand native weaponry, including many a patu, a foot-long club of well-polished stone or wood, and many a taiaha, a 5-foot-long spear of heavy wood, just as the natives are able to get a close-up look at the English thundersticks, trying to determine how such a small and insignificant haorea-looking thing could make such a noise and kill at such a distance. Does it unleash bad spirits, do you suppose? And why do you suppose that these men are wearing such strange garb? One of them has a shining blue coat with alluring bursts of gold light coming from it, while others have red coats and white trousers, and still others have a strange kind of knee-length garment that floats about their legs as they walk.
This ends CD 9.